Monsters are taking over the land, appearing from everywhere. They are huge and very dangerous. In 2045, the entire population of planet Earth is struggling to defeat terrible monsters. Unfortunately, humanity proves too weak to fully resist the uninvited guests who can take the life of even a highly trained fighter with a single blow. Just one claw of the monster pierces through a warrior in strong armor. Any army sent to fight the aliens turns out to be ineffective, and people die in the dozens if not hundreds. One of the soldiers looking around and seeing his fallen comrades wonders if this is what the end of his life looks like. Seeing the approaching monster, the soldier throws his weapon to the ground and kneels, hoping that at least the creature's obedience will save his life. Already prepared for his possible death, the soldier discovers that one of his surviving comrades rushes to attack the monster, covering it with his body. The monster, having received a blow from the soldier, begins to get even more angry and wants to deal with him as quickly as possible. The soldier does not retreat and continues to attack the monster because this is his only chance of survival. The soldier manages to wound the monster and cuts off one of its tentacles. The monster becomes enraged, begins to writhe and prepare for a counterattack. The soldier tries to dodge the monster's attacks and also counterattack. In one of the subsequent blows, the soldier manages to cut off another of the monster's tentacles. The monster rushes about and waves its tentacles to the sides, trying to catch the soldier. The soldier manages to evade the monster again. He waits for the opportune moment to deliver the finishing blow. The soldier finds an opportunity and, taking a few steps to the side, begins firing his pistol. This soldier is the commander-in-chief of the last remaining defense forces on Earth. His name is Han Sunday. He turns to his subordinate and asks him to stand up, insisting that it's time for them to leave. The soldier immediately rises from the ground, ready to follow his commander. Commander Han Sun reloads his weapon and moves forward, leading one of his few surviving subordinates. Humanity has been waging war against monsters for decades now, but its strength is increasingly waning. Humanity has fought countless battles, still holding on with almost its last strength. This battle was one of the decisive ones, and only a small number of monsters remain. This provides even more motivation to continue this bloody and brutal war. The goal humanity is moving toward is already very close. It's literally right before our eyes. Commander Han Song rushes forward and fires a few more shots. Suddenly, a magical portal appears in front of Han Sung, from which light emanates. Han Song had never seen such a phenomenon before, and seeing it just a few steps away from himself, he couldn't explain to himself what he was seeing. A subordinate soldier covers the rear of his commander and does not notice how he literally disappears under the influence of some kind of magic. The portal slams shut, and all that remains of Han Sun is his machine gun, which falls to the ground and thereby attracts the attention of his subordinate. Once inside the portal, Han Sun hears a voice asking him to listen to the growing sound. Han Sun finds that his body is bound in chains and he cannot move at all, and in front of him, he sees strangers who are happy that they were able to realize their plan. Strangers call Han Sun a hero from another world they've heard a lot about. But he doesn't pay much attention to this and tries to break free from the glowing shackles and understand where he ended up. An old man comes out of the darkness and, removing the hood of his robe, welcomes Han Sun to the Empire as a hero from another world. Han Sun feels confused and can't even guess why all this is happening to him. The old man asks Han Sun to defeat the Demon King and save their world. Han Sun starts to get angry and, cursing, tries to find out what this man is talking about and demands to know where he is and who everyone present is, and also states that he has no time for such conversations because he should be in Korea. The old man waves his hand and directs magical energy at Han Sun, forcing him to remain silent. The vow of assured peace is activated, and at that moment Han Sun feels as if many lightning bolts are striking him at once, propelling his entire body forward. The old man asks the commander not to resist, explaining that this magic will not harm him as long as he is polite and he is obedient. Han Sun, barely holding back tears, decides to remain silent, only thinking that this is a poor display of politeness. The old man repeats his request for the Demon King's victory, and a man in a robe comes out to him with a large sword. The sword is thrown at Han Sun's feet with the words that he must save their empire. The old man notes that if Han Sun does this, they might be able to send him back to his world. Everything fades before Han Sun's eyes after the old man asks if he accepts this request. Han Sun can't figure out why exactly he ended up in this dimension, but he also understands that he has no choice but to refuse. Han Sung looks the old man straight in the eyes and promises to fulfill his request and defeat the Demon King. And so Han Sun was summoned to a completely completely different world to fight again as a hero of the Empire's other world. Han Sung worked tirelessly and performed an endless number of approaches during training. Han Sung chopped every time anew, fulfilling all the endless requests of the Empire. Han Sung spent more than 15 years and sacrificed his youth to finally defeat the Demon King Valrur. Every night Han Sung dreams of what he will do when he returns home, but one day the old man tells him that he wants to tell him about his next mission. Han Sung is outraged and reminds him of their agreement, to which the old man explains that saving the Empire does not end with just killing the Demon King. The old man explains that there are still those who oppose the unification of the Empire, and they must be destroyed because they cannot allow another dissident to rise up, so Han Sung only needs to take care of one threat to the Empire. The danger is Bedel from the kingdom of the Knights of Teutonia, and Han Sung needs to eliminate him to finally be free. Taking a sip of tea, the old man asks Han Sung to agree to this and smirks slightly. Han Sung feels a pressure on his neck as if he is wearing a collar, and this awakens anger in him again. Han Sung curses the entire empire but understands that he, like a dog in a collar, simply has no other choice. With the thought that everything must end someday, Han Sung enters another war. Soon Han Sung finds himself in the kingdom of the Knights of Teutonia and fights with the very same Bedel, who poses a threat to the entire empire. Through diligent training and study, Han Sung manages to inflict a mortal wound on the enemy. Bedel looked at his wound, took a few steps back, and said that he could not have imagined that Han Sung would actually turn out to be a fool. Han Sung looks down at the floor and says that he had no other choice and asks Bedel for forgiveness for what he did. Bedel smiles at him and asks him not to apologize for what he did. Bedel's strength leaves him, and he, falling to the floor, warns that Han Sung will soon be thrown out of the way too. Han Sung turns away and, leaving, says that it's all over for him and he will soon return home, and at that moment a knight appears behind him. Han Sung did not expect the danger and was unable to dodge the enemy's deadly threads that sank into his neck. The knight smirked and pulled Han Sung back, noting that he had done a good job as a hero from another world. Han Sung recognizes this man as Count Brandenburgh and feels the strongest annoyance at how stupidly he fell into his clutches. Count Brandenburgh notes that Han Sung has fought well over the past years, doing his job well as the Empire's loyal hunting dog, and the great general and holy knight acknowledges this. Han Sung calls him and the others vile hypocrites, now realizing that he was never intended to be sent home in the first place. Count Brandenburgh laughs, swings his sword, and is surprised that Han Sung even hoped to return home, since they didn't need it, since a hunting dog only knows how to bite. Count Brandenburgh deals Han Sung a fatal blow, and when he falls he sells himself to him. Han Sung, realizing that life was leaving his body, thinks about how he himself knew that he would hardly be allowed to go home. Most of all, Han Sung thinks that he will never forget this humiliation and vows that he will make the damned empire pay for it without total destruction. On that night, a rebirth occurs when one life closes its eyes and another opens them. The baby hears his mother, the Duchess, being congratulated on the birth of her son and heir. A sweet, fair-haired, blue-eyed woman reaches out to the child and tells him that she is his mother in a very gentle voice. The baby, looking at his mother and some man next to him, who is possibly his father, realizes that he has already seen this face before. Han Sung, in the body of a newborn, quickly remembers where his parents' faces are familiar to him. Han Sung knew about his current father in his past life, and that he is the greatest necromancer and black magician on the continent. This man bears the name of Duke Saxena and is known to everyone. Han Sung realizes that he is most likely in the capital of the Empire's forbidden magic, in the necropolis where the Black Tower is located. The Rebirth Stone, which can only be activated once, was successfully activated. It was the only forbidden artifact Han Sung had been hiding and planned to use to remove his leash. Han Sung can't believe he was born the firstborn of the Duchy of Saxe, one of the largest noble families in the empire. Han Sung smiles, realizing that this time he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He thinks that when he grows up and learns necromancy, he will be able to destroy every single one of the damned imperial hypocrites who deceived him. Han Sung sees the image of the Duke of Brandenburgh, who personally took his life, and his hatred intensifies. The Duke of Saxe sees that his child is not crying and asks the nanny to check if everything is okay with her son. The nanny immediately approaches the baby and, examining him, is surprised because he is breathing clearly but is completely silent, which is not like other newborn children. Han Sung frowned slightly and, looking at his mother, mentally noted that he was not really a child and could not bring tears to his eyes so easily. The nanny takes the baby in her arms and examines him more closely at the Duchess's request, and immediately assures the woman that she should not worry about her son's condition. The Duke of Saxe wonders thoughtfully whether the fact that his child does not cry is a bad omen, but the nanny insists that they should not worry. The nanny also says that if the Duke sincerely wishes for the child to cry, she can spank him on the buttocks until the tears run dry, and demonstrates this visually. This comes as a great surprise to Han's son, but he can bear the pain. The Duke of Saxe smiles, noting how stubborn his child is, and the Duchess, laughing, suggests that the son has apparently inherited the willpower of his grace, his father. The Duchess asks the nanny to give her the child, so that she can try slapping the child on the buttocks herself. Han's son is very angry, and thinks that his parents are just stupid for thinking that there is something wrong with their son. The Duchess takes the child in her arms, and immediately her expression becomes very serious, and she waves her hand high. Han's son braces himself for a powerful blow and sheds a small tear in anticipation. Surprisingly, Han's son doesn't feel the blow, only the soft, gentle touch of his mother's hand on his body. Han's son is very surprised, although he cannot say so due to the peculiarities of his new body. At that moment, when the warmth of his mother's gentle hand touched his skin, Han's son suddenly remembered something. Han's son's entire past life flashes before his eyes, all the brutal battles reliving themselves. He remembers all the serious injuries he has ever received. Han's son remembers that he was always alone, and cannot remember the last time he felt such warmth and tenderness. The soft, trembling hand of the young diplomatic lady, his new mother, radiates a love that Han's son has not known for many years. Han's son, who had not shed a tear since he was old enough to think, could no longer help but cry and began to scream loudly and sob in his arms. Before going to bed, the Duke of Saxe talks to his wife about how 8 years have passed since their son Day was born, and how time flies very quickly, to which the Duchess unconditionally agrees. The Duchess asks her husband if their son is still in the study, and notes with a smile that he has not opened his books since he was 4 years old, to which the Duke with the same smile replies that their son takes after his mother. The Duke talks about his son's new interest in magic. He is delighted by this news. The Duchess gently stroked her husband's face, asking if he had forgotten the promise he made to her. Alan Duke Saxona's name asked if his wife was referring to the promise that their son would not be trained in necromancy. The Duchess is afraid that her son's new hobby will go too far and turn into trouble. When the Duke repeats his promise, his wife sighs with relief and smiles even wider, knowing that her wish has not been forgotten. The Duke sits up a little and, sitting comfortably in bed, decides to talk to his wife about his birthday gift to Dale. Suddenly there's a noise outside the door, followed immediately by a knock. The Duke is indignant at the late interruption, but a maid bursts into the room and says there's a problem with young Master Dale. The Duke and Duchess jump in fright, immediately thinking that something terrible has happened. The Duke and Duchess immediately go to their little son's room and find him crawling on the floor. The boy looks completely calm and is very surprised when he sees his parents at such a late hour. The Duchess runs up to him and anxiously asks if he is hurt and tries to find out what happened, but the boy tries to evade and assures his parents that he is fine. Duke Saxe senses mana in the air, which surprises him greatly, but he says nothing to his wife and son. Gertzak cannot understand how his son, who only turned 8 years old, can already release mana. Gertzak understands that this cannot be left like this, approaches his son, and in a menacing tone asks if he has freed Manu from his body. Dale knows he's screwed up big time, and there was no doubt his father would find it strange, even though he himself couldn't have imagined that he would be able to release mana so soon. And he thinks that if he doesn't answer his father quickly, then he and his mother might become suspicious of his true identity, which he is trying to hide. Gertzak can hardly contain the smile on his face because he is actually very happy that his son is so strong. Gertzak strokes the boy's head, noting that this is what one would expect from one's son. Gertza sighs heavily, and you note that he is very sorry that he cannot teach his son necromancy, which Dale is very surprised about but tries not to show it. The Duchess also broke into a smile and said that the servants would clean up all the mess that Dale had made, and that he himself should quickly return to his room. When the boy leaves, Gertzak turns to Elena, his wife, and again wants to talk to her about a birthday present for their son. Now the Duke is absolutely sure that he has chosen a very good option, and his wife must also support it. Sometime later, there is a banquet to celebrate Dale's birthday, which is attended by a lot of guests from all over the area. All the guests say that such a grand banquet has not been held for a long time and are eagerly awaiting the appearance of the young gentleman. Meanwhile, Dale sits on the second floor of the banquet hall, completely depressed and in no hurry to go down to the guests. And he thinks about how everyone down there has gathered just to celebrate his birthday. It's impressive, but it seems tiring. And he thinks that maybe he feels awkward because he is used to being treated like an outcast since the time when he was a hero, and when he is treated like a young master he feels awkward. Besides, Dale is still upset about the fact that he destroyed his desk the other day and can't believe that his mother went crazy just from the memory of the time when he was a hero in his past life. Yes, I understand that no matter what he thinks about it, his body has too many talents to give up necromancy. Dale just doesn't understand how he should convince his father so that he can teach him, and decides that the conversation his parents had about a gift for him can be turned around and he can ask his father to personally teach him necromancy. Soon the Duchess enters the hall with a stranger in a hooded robe. Elena immediately apologizes to her son for keeping him waiting so long. Coming closer, the Duchess congratulates her son on his birthday and breaks into a smile. Dale asks his mother about the stranger behind her, and the Duchess asks the man to step forward a little so she can introduce him. The Duchess explains that their guest is an elder of the Blue Magic Tower and a master of water magic. The man takes off his robe, and it turns out to be a pretty girl with long elven ears dedicated to Lady Cipia. Lady Cipia smiles at Dale and remarks that she looks forward to working with him. The Duchess winks at her son and once again congratulates him on his birthday, hinting that this girl is his gift. Dale is very surprised that his parents hired an elder from the Blue Tower as his teacher, because in this case they intend to teach him water magic, which is aimed at protection and destruction, and now the guesses that his mother does not want him to study dark magic are confirmed. Lady Cipia asks the boy if they could talk alone, and Dale gives the go-ahead. Lady Cipia takes Dale out into the winter forest away from prying ears, so that they can get to know each other better, and there she tells him that she was asked to teach him only water magic, which he has probably already heard. Lady Cipia asks Dale if he is disappointed, as she is sure that he would like to learn another type of magic, which leaves the boy a little confused. Dale wonders how Lady Cipia found out about this, and says that it is quite natural that he would go to study his father's necromancy dark magic. Lady Cipia, after a moment's thought, notes that the conditions for the Black Duke's marriage play a major role, which is a fact known throughout the Empire. When the Black Duke courted Lady Elena, she was terrified by his ill fame. For Lady Elena's sake, the Black Duke promises that his dark legacy will not be passed on to his heirs. On the wedding day, the elders and the Black Tower wear snow-white outfits instead of their usual black robes. Lady Cipia explains that since Dale's parents' marriage was based on such a vow, it will be difficult for him to study dark magic right away, but she promises that she will find a way to convince Lady Elena. Lady Cipia looks at the boy and asks if he is ready to accept her training, clearly worried that he will refuse. Very confused, he asks if dark magic or necromancy bothers the teacher, because for an elf who values the laws of nature, the resurrection of the dead must be something terrible. Lady Cipia starts laughing loudly at the young gentleman's statement and notes that his question sounds funny. Dale and Lady Cipia come to the conclusion that the holy power of the priests who resurrect the dying is part of the will of nature, and the elf notes that necromancy or resurrection in her opinion are one and the same. Dale notices that this elf is very different from the usual narrow-minded elves and suggests that she is a much better teacher than he thought. Lady Cipia suggests that the young master begin their first lesson immediately, and noting that she heard that a few days ago the young master created a fragment of a mana circle, suggests setting their first goal, that is to expand this fragment and form the first circle. And he thinks that this proposal is ideal because in the books on magic that he read, it is required to use the first circle. Lady Cipia asks Dale to put his hand on his heart and concentrate, and he immediately follows her instructions. Dale thinks that the world he now lives in is very different from the earth because it is filled with mana. However, unless one is an ancient creature like a dragon, it is impossible to manipulate raw mana in this way. No one in this world can use raw mana no matter how much they want to. Therefore, to filter the processing of this raw mana, a mana heart circle is required. After collecting and arranging the scattered fragments of the mana circle around the heart, you need to make the assembled circle rotate evenly around it. Dale realizes that the circle is the process of capturing the path that Mom takes to her heart, just like teacher Cipia told him. Lady Cipia asks the young master to begin to gently rotate the mana around his heart. The teacher explains that this usually takes about a month and advises the boys not to rush, but Dale understands that things are different for him and asks the teacher to pay attention to him. Dale turns to teacher Cipia and shows that he has already done it. Lady Cipia looks at the young boy with fascination who was able to achieve such results right away, and is very amazed by this. Lady Cipia doesn't believe that a child who has just begun training can form a circle in a matter of minutes. She assumes that the young master is a very gifted child with a talent for magic that is worth developing. Lady Cipia asks Dale to try releasing his magical power through the circle. Dale agrees and begins to concentrate on the task given to him. Usually even releasing mana through the circle is not always possible for beginners. At this level, Dale won't be able to take revenge on the Empire, let alone catch up with Duke Saxena. In his previous life, he could only use deadly combat magic through the magical engravings on his body, but this time things are different. Dale realizes that this body, having inherited the talent of the Black Tower's ward, naturally accepts mana. Dale suggests that he might be able to learn not only water magic but other types of magic as well. Now he needs to focus on it, allow the mana he took into his body to flow to his fingertips and create it. Dale represents the most deadly shard that will be aimed at the Empire's throat. Without expecting it, a lot of energy begins to emanate from his fingertips, which is transformed into crystal. Lady Cipia watches Dale work closely and is very puzzled. Lady Cipia knows full well that mana is usually destroyed upon exiting the body, but Dale crystallized the magical power to create a rather completely icy bolt. Lady Cipia suggests that since the young master was focusing on the form, his destructive powers might no longer be enough. Dale fires an ice bolt that flies straight forward. An ice bolt hits the tree opposite the young gentleman in a second. A moment later, the ice bolt explodes and shatters into many small pieces. The explosion turns out to be quite powerful, causing Lady Cipia to become even more confused. The explosion caused by the young master's magic proves to be quite destructive. The elf mentally notes that the ice bolt is sharp enough to pierce through wood, and that this is not the level of precision that a mere 8-year-old child can demonstrate. Syria is shocked and can hardly believe what she sees. Cipia looked at the young gentleman who was waving his hand at her with a smile and did not at all understand who was actually standing in front of her. Looking at the resulting destruction, the elf notes that she thought that at best the result of Dale's work would be at the level of mana transfer, but it turned out that the element of ice was used during the release of mana. It was basic magic, but no one would think that Dale would manifest magic that so perfectly absorbed the cold nearby. Dale came closer to his, wondering if he had done anything wrong to make her think so. Lady Cipia turns to him with a smile, and Dale realizes that she is proud of him. Dale himself understands that the complexity of the magic formula is far beyond what an ordinary innocent child could unknowingly create. The magic includes 3 formulas known as the golden ratio of combat magic and is rotation, acceleration, and overload. Lady Cipia thinks that Dale is able to unknowingly project and cast such an utterly deadly spell, which is astounding. The elf waves with a smile at the young gentleman and notes that this is nonsense, and now understands why the Herzog might have considered this regrettable. After meeting the young master, Lady Cipia goes to talk to Duke Saxon and tells him that she cannot teach his son. The Duke notes that if his son was able to reach the first circle in just a few minutes, then Cipia should definitely teach him. Cipia replies that as soon as young Lord Dale reached the first circle, he immediately cast the perfect deadly spell. Cipia's answer visibly tenses the Duke, who hadn't expected to hear such news. Cipia admits that it was hard for her to believe that this was done by a simple 8-year-old child who used a combat magic formula to create magic, and it was in the perfect golden ratio. Cipia tells Duke Sax directly that his son has a talent for murder. Gertzak is very surprised and clarifies that as the elder of the Blue Magic Tower, which opposes violence, Cipia cannot teach Dale. Lady Cipia took a sip of tea and replied that Hertz had not drawn the correct conclusion. The elf explains that if anything happens, she will feel a strong desire to set him on the right path with her own hands. Gertzak throws up his hands and notes that in that case Lady Cipia has no reason to refuse. The elf answers the Duke, directly explaining that apparently young Master Dale has already mastered the magic he wanted to study. Duke Sax cannot find the words to answer, and the elf, seeing this, notes that she has heard a lot about his love story and respects the promise he made to Lady Elena. In an instant, the elf's face turns gloomy, and the girl declares that this does not give the Duke the right to decide the future of his child, especially if it is someone with such great talent as the young master. At this time, Dale stands outside the door, listening intently throughout the conversation but cannot hear a single word. The boy sits down on the floor near the door. He's very upset because he understands they're talking about him. and he didn't expect that his first spell would show such power that the Tower Master Cipia would look so surprised. Dale decides that from now on he will have to control his power more carefully, although he is not very fond of the idea. Lost in thought, Dale doesn't notice a man appear in the corridor and flinches when he is called. The young man's face immediately became very joyful and delighted at the sight of the guest. In front of him, he sees his Uncle Helmet, who asks the young gentleman what he is doing in the corridor. Dale rises to his feet and asks permission to first ask where his uncle was. Uncle Helmet laughs and explains that he was away to fulfill his duty to protect the ducal family, and then sits down a little to hug the boy. Uncle Helmet throws the boy high into the air and adds that he also traveled to defeat terrible monsters. Dale wonders if his uncle was in the dungeons, knowing for sure that this is how it happened. Dale pretends to perceive this as more of a fairy tale because he has to play the role of a little child. In fact, he knows that in this world, the appearance of dungeons or an infestation of monsters is a serious problem for any territory. Ever since the Demon King was still alive, monsters attacking civilian areas have caused great damage. That is why the knights of each house first and foremost dedicate themselves to clearing out the unexplored dungeons within the Demon King's territory. The knights are also tasked with destroying the monsters that have entered the dungeon through the breaches. In particular, the situation in the Duchy of Saxe is several times more serious than in other territories. The reason was in Dale himself when he was still living his past life. After his past life hero from another world defeated the Demon King, Duke Saxe is ordered to turn the Demon King's territory into the Empire's territory by repairing the monsters inhabiting it. Dale thought that, in technical terms Vanya, this could be called throwing out the remains. Uncle Helmet placed the boy on the floor and Dale asked the knight to take care of himself. The knight laughed at the young lord's concern for him. Suddenly the doors nearby open and Duke Saxe comes out into the corridor, noting that the knight Helmet is apparently in good health. Gertzak emphasizes that he appreciates Helmet's hard work during the recent dungeon raid. By this time, the Duchess herself appears in the corridor with her maids, and is happy that everyone was just assembled. Dale brings the Duchess and immediately wonders why she came at that particular moment. The Duchess approaches her son and delightedly distracts him, a broad smile spreading across her face. The Duchess sits down next to her son and notes that she heard that he reached the first circle and admits that she is very proud of him. The Duke of Saxe congratulates his son more reservedly and asks him to tell his father immediately if there is anything he would like to do. Dale wonders if it would be considered cunning to ask his father to teach him necromancy, and at the same time thinks about what children at this age can even dream about. Dale looks at his father and mother and declares that he wants a little sister, causing them to freeze in place. The Duke promises his son that he and his mother will try their best, and the knights present nearby can hardly contain their laughter. After this conversation, everyone went about their business and the young master was sent to his chambers. Dale lies on his bed silently cursing at himself for having to act like a child even though he's just stuck in this little body. Dale feels very tired and assumes that it is because he used magic and closes his eyes. As soon as Dale falls asleep, he immediately returns to his past life and trembles with fear. He is Han Sung again and is living the moment of his death. And the friend of the Knight of Brandenburgg, well, everything happens differently than the first time. The knight piercing Han Sun with his sword notes how cunning people are and how easy it is to become soft. The knight whispers in Han Sun's ear asking if he is happy that he now has a great home and loving parents, and if he thinks about revenge so often when he is warm and cozy. The knight promises in a cruel voice that the Empire will find Han Sun and kill him so that not a single trace of him remains, and it only takes a little time. Dale jumps up in his bed, awakened by such a nightmare. The energy inside him pulses as if trying to tear him apart. Yes, he grabs them by the chest, realizing that his heart seems about to explode. Let me guess that he feels the riot of mana that he has heard so much about. Dale carefully gets out of bed and walks toward the exit, cursing out loud at the Empire, which is to blame for everything that's happening to him. Dale understands that the Empire won't let him go. The young gentleman goes outside thinking that he will feel better if he gets some fresh air. Go outside and the boy realizes that he is not feeling any better and that this terrible feeling inside is only getting stronger. And the teacher shudders when she hears the elf's voice, noting that the boy is apparently in a very difficult situation. Cipia continues to be amazed that such a young boy is experiencing a mana riot and is once again convinced that he is a very talented child, but she also realizes that she cannot get rid of the feeling of danger. Cipia feels that the sense of danger comes from this boy who at first glance is completely innocent. Cipia decides to help Dale feel better with the thought that once the word takes hold of this child's magic, it will become irreversible. Cipia performs some magical manipulation that should help the young lord calm down. Dale immediately finds that the bursting sensation inside has disappeared. The mana riot has ceased. Cipia, having made sure that everything was all right with the young lord, calls out to him, wanting to explain something. The elf tells the boy that the essence of magic is a mirror of the heart, and therefore each magician has his own individuality even if they use the same magic, and his talent lies in taking the lives of other people. The elf takes out some book with a pentagram on the cover and warns the young lord that his talent is very dangerous. Lady Cipia, handing Dale the book, admits that she considers herself very fortunate to be able to teach him. The elf gives the young lord a magical tome of necromancers, which greatly surprises Dale. Lady Cipia wonders out loud that perhaps it is fate that from now on she will be with Dale, and smiles. The elf looks at the confused boy and congratulates him on his birthday. Dale, without saying anything to his teacher, throws himself at her with hugs, and Cipia realizes that he needs help, which she asks him about directly. A few days later, Lady Cipia leads the young lord beyond the plains of the northern gate. Arriving at the appointed place, the young lord is very surprised when he sees the rabbits. Lady Cipia, looking at the rabbits, tells the young lord that this is precisely what his new task will be connected with. The teacher asks the young lord to remember how he went hunting with his father. Dale focuses on the little white rabbit, who has no idea he's in danger. Dale concentrates his magic and creates an ice bolt that is aimed at the rabbit. Lady Cipia only watches her student without suggesting anything to him. The young lord proves to be very accurate and fires an ice bolt right at his target. Lady Cipia watches Dale closely, as it is very important for her to give an accurate assessment of his actions. The elf notices that despite the fact that the young lord is taking someone else's life, his hands do not tremble. As Dale completes his task, the teacher turns to him and explains that even if it is the same spell, its form varies infinitely from mage to mage. Elphica smiles and asks if the young lord knows the reason for this phenomenon, and Dale replies that he hasn't heard anything about it. Cipia explains to him that this is because a person's magic is ultimately a mirror reflecting their mind, and it materializes what lies within their heart through mana particles, so magic inevitably reveals the landscape of the inner self. Dale looks closely at the elf, trying to understand what she is trying to hint to him. Cipia, tell me that terms like firewall are just steps for developing the imagination, allowing one to strengthen a mental image, and even the magic taught in magic towers is no different. Cipia emphasizes that the red magic tower will appreciate order through force. The blue magic tower values order through harmony, and the philosophy of each magic tower is embodied in the form of their magic. The elf explains that the philosophy to which each magic tower is dedicated is the basis of their magical system. The elder also adds that in addition to the red and blue magic towers, there are also black, white, and green ones. Cipia smiles and looks at her young student, hoping he is grasping all this information. Dale is very surprised when the elf tells him that the time has not yet come to study all the information she told him about. The most basic form of necromancy is raising zombies, which is what Dale must work on. It is the art of reviving a corpse using mana threads to control it. Dale diligently performs all the steps of the spell and discovers his success. The young lord ties threads of mana to the head, spine, and knees of the crowd, and it seems to come to life, for which Cipia praises her student. Dale watches closely as the rabbit's body completely obeys him. Cipia suggests that Dale move on to the next one straight away, and he readily agrees. Dale uses the frozen armor spell. The young lord is completely focused on his task. His eyes gleam with determination and confidence. A powerful magical energy forms around the young lord, which he manages to control with ease. By converting the energy, Dale creates an ice spike that he launches straight in front of him. The spike seems to flow around the resurrected rabbit, creating an icy armor around him. Seeing this, Cipia praises the student for his excellent work. Cipia suggests testing the defense Dale has created and casts an attack spell. Dale watches his teacher's actions closely, hoping that his work was of high quality, and in fact, Cipia launches an ice spike at the rabbit with the protection Dale had placed. The rabbit remains unharmed and the ice armor is not destroyed. Dale laughs loudly, glad that everything worked and he managed to block the teacher's shot. Lady Cipia again praises the boy for his progress. She is truly impressed by his achievements. Cipia notices that Dale apparently wants to say something and suggests that he boldly do so. Dale asks Lady Cipia to teach him how to better use water magic. Lady Cipia smiles, contentedly glad that the boy wants to learn as much as possible. However, Lady Cipia rejects Dale's request, which leaves him puzzled. Lady Cipia explains that what he did was a very simple form of water magic. The elf also explains that like all magic, as it develops, the attribute of water requires a deeper insight into its essence and a higher level of understanding. The teacher notes that most beginners find it difficult to master even one type of magic. Only those who are called double magicians can handle two types at the same time. Lady Cipia says that at Dale's age this is almost impossible, and in her opinion it looks like excessive ambition on his part. Dale is very outraged by his teacher's answer and asks her to explain to him why she is not sure about him. Dale is outraged that after everything he has shown, Lady Cipia still thinks it is not enough. The young lord reminds that Cipia herself said that they would find their way forward together. The elf remembers her words but is a little confused, not knowing how to convey her vision to the boy, and simply decides to end the lesson. That night in his office, Dale searches for new books that will help him learn more. Dale is well aware that there was nothing he couldn't do on his own and wants to prove himself even better so that Cipia will change her mind. Dale wants to leave the teacher without a choice and doubt about whether to teach him more powerful spells. The young lord spends the whole night studying books, learning as much information as possible, and in the next lesson he constantly misses what the teacher tells him. Cipia asks if the young lord is okay and guesses that he most likely did not sleep a wink last night, to which the boy explains that he stayed late to prepare something. Cipia is a little concerned about the student's assertiveness and asks him not to overexert himself, to which Dale agrees with a smile. He wants to demonstrate to the teacher what he has learned as quickly as possible. He uses a spell and directs it at the guinea pig. Cipia is pleased to note that the young lord has already fully mastered this spell. Dale casts another ice spell. A magical explosion occurs, provoked by Dale himself. Lady Cipia is amazed that the young lord was able to cast an ice blast spell, but it turns out that this is not all that the young lord wants to demonstrate. The rabbit Dale revived stands up on its hind legs. A certain energy is growing within it. The movements of magic at this point begin to accelerate and intensify. In an instant, another powerful explosion occurs. Lady Cipia jumps back a couple of steps as if not believing her own eyes. Lady Cipia doesn't know how to react to the work of her student, from whom she certainly didn't expect to see such a thing. Dale turns to the teacher and waits for her reaction. Dale explains that he used a corpse explosion spell and an ice explosion spell, combining the properties of water and darkness into one. Dale wonders if he can be considered a dual mage with so many abilities. Lady Cipia and her apprentice, the young lord, stand under the protective dome. Lady Cipia thinks this means that she has never seen the attack method that her student used before. Combined with the icy blast from the frozen armor, the corpse's explosion reached a larger area of effect. It didn't end there. Shards of ice and bone flew like blades. Lady Cipia thinks that this magic is used only for killing, and the person who used it probably dedicated his entire life to fighting. Lady Cipia thinks for a long time about what form the mental image of the child for whom she has become a teacher takes. Dale, however, diligently portrays a truly small child who sometimes makes mistakes or does something unpredictable. Suddenly the sound of hooves was heard, and the young lord noticed that Uncle Helmet had arrived. The knight waved his hand in greeting, and Dale, hurrying to meet him, asks if he has returned from another raid in the dungeons. Uncle Helmet says that this time he defeated a small group of monsters. Approaching the young lord and the elf, Uncle Helmet emphasizes that the black cavalry had to sweat. The knight nods to the side, indicating his men, who remain to the side. The black cavalry, armed with spears imbued with aura, are the unrivaled cavalry of the Duchy of Saxony. In addition to this, their knight captain Sir Helmet is one of the 7 sword masters on the continent. Dale laughs and asks the knights if he forgot about his promise to teach him swordsmanship. I think that learning ball handling techniques from a person of high status was a great opportunity. The knight assures him that he remembers his promise, and the young lord waves his hand to him again and says that he hopes for their soon meeting. Before galloping off to the estate, the knight asks the young lord not to linger outside for long, as it is already very cold. Lady Cipia agrees with the knights and offers their student to return to the castle. As night falls, Lady Cipia visits the Duke's study again to report on his son's progress over a warming cup of tea. Elphica tells that the young Master Dale has completed his first circle of necromancy and water magic. Cipia expresses a little alarm but doesn't try to hide it. The Duke, sitting next to his wife, reminds her that Cipia promised to teach their son something a little different. The elf lowers her gaze to the floor and confirms that she promised to teach the young lord only water magic. Cipia explains that his mentor would like to teach him everything he would like to learn himself, but the boy does not want to study only water magic. The Duke and Duchess understand that they have no other choice no matter how much they want it. For a moment there is silence in the room. Everyone must consider their words. The Duchess asks Lady Cipia to continue teaching her son water magic if he does not object. The elf agrees and notes that from now on she will also take care of him. After this conversation, Lady Cipia hurries to leave the Duke and Duchess. Before leaving their office, Lady Cipia sincerely apologizes for breaking her promise. As the elf leaves the hall, the Duchess stretches and notes that her and her husband's child is undoubtedly extraordinary, and she cannot believe that he became a dual mage at such a young age. At the same time, the woman notes that from time to time he really does scare her, although he should be capable of this since he is their child. The Duke looks at his wife and addresses her in a very anxious voice. The Duke admits that he would like to teach Dale necromancy no matter what because he wants to give him the strength to fulfill the duties of a lord. The Duke also notes that their son will make an excellent student who has every chance of deeply studying this magic. The Duke covers his face with his hands and apologizes to his wife for wanting their son to inherit his legacy. Duchess Helena replies that public opinion about necromancy still leaves much to be desired and people are afraid of it and call it death magic. Looking at her husband, the Duchess explains that this is precisely why she wants to dissuade him from this intention. The Duchess asks her husband to train their son so that he becomes a necromancer who can ignore the perception of necromancy by others, and then lightly hugs the Duke. The Duke gives in and falls into his wife's arms, but cannot give her a definite promise. After thinking for a moment, the Duke hugs his wife and promises that he will try to fulfill her request, but at the same time swears that he will do everything to ensure that their son becomes the best. The first day of special necromancy training began, and the Duke immediately told his son that he was very disappointed in him. The Duke is very surprised that his son was reviving lives without even suspecting that he was controlling them. Dale doesn't know what to answer his father because this is all that his teacher taught him and he can't do anything about it. As soon as Dale showed his father the basics of necromancy that he learned from his teacher, he took him to the magic workshop located underground in the castle of Duke Noir. The Duke warned that while he was teaching his son, he should not even think about using such a basic necromancy spell. The Duke provides his son with many books and declares that he will begin by memorizing the bone and muscle structure of all life forms. The Duke is very strict and demands complete obedience from his son. Dale, however, understands that he is obligated to carry out all his father's orders. All the books that Dale's father gave him were professional books that, in his world, only doctors could read. Once Dale had mastered every letter in the books, his father praised his mastery of the basics and they finally moved on to practical magic. The Duke notes that they will now begin their real work, which Dale is very happy about. The Duke of Saxe brings his son into one of the rooms in the workshop, and the boy, seeing where they have come, begins to feel a little uncomfortable. Dad shows Dale the goblin's corpse and Dale has no idea yet what their lesson will involve. Gertzak smiles and notes that his son seems very puzzled by what he saw. Gertzak explains that an inexperienced mock can only make the corpse of a sword master move like a zombie, and on the other hand, an experienced person can turn an ordinary soldier into a death knight. Gertzak, pointing to the goblin's corpse, explains that an ordinary undead soldier lies in front of his son and asks how his son plans to control him. Dale looks closely at the goblin's corpse and studies it, trying to figure out where to start working. After examining the goblin carefully, Dale moves on to practical training and uses a spell. Unlike a rabbit, which is small in size and consists of only a few bones, a goblin is much more difficult to control as it is bipedal and requires tying up many threads of mana. Dale thinks it's like trying to control a complex puppet. The young lord also thinks that it would be a mistake to use posthumous hardness to strengthen his defense. The boy discovers that the goblin's joints are frozen and he cannot move them. Dale is at a loss as to what he should do in this situation. The Duke places his hand on his son's shoulder and explains that it would be a good idea to strengthen the goblin's body, increasing its post-mortem rigidity. The Duke explains that the side effect is that it restricts the corpse's movement, which surprises the boy. The Duke decides to show his son everything by personal example and asks him to carefully observe his actions. The Duke easily uses his power, focusing it not on the goblin, and it immediately comes to life. Dale is very shocked by what he sees. The boy could not have imagined before how strong his father was, although he knew about it very well from hearsay. The goblin slowly rises from his seat and, under the influence of the Duke of Power, calmly moves his arms and legs. The Duke draws his son's attention to the goblin's rib cage. The Duke explains that the rib cages are designed to protect a person's internal organs. Dale listens carefully to his father and learns that in the case of the goblin there was no need to protect the internal organs because he was dead. The Duke easily controls the goblin and makes his lifeless body move as he pleases. Noir Sax asks his son to understand the structure of his target and change it to suit his needs. Dale realizes at this moment how much he really doesn't know and how weak he is. The Duke emphasizes that this is the basis of black magic, without which further development will not be possible. Dale thinks for a moment and after a short silence turns to his father. The young lord asks his father to teach him the mentality of the Black Magic Tower. Hearing his son's request, the Duke of Saxe smiles as he looks at him. The Duke asks if his son wants to hear the real truth. The Duke sits down next to his son and tells him that truth always exists within death. With some trepidation, Noir Saxon explains to Dale that this is precisely why they must understand the hardships of life in order to get to the bottom of the truth. Dale looks at his father and thinks with regret that he has no idea what his son went through while living his past life. Dale is transported back to his past life for a moment and becomes Han's son. Everything around him is burning and hatred is playing inside him. The man kneels and begs Han's son to spare him, calling him a great hero. The man asks to give him life and not to kill, but Han's son does not feel a drop of regret and swings his sword. Han's son only catches a glimpse of the man's gaze before striking him. The Duke is alarmed by his son's silence and, hugging him, asks if he is okay. The Duke notes that Dale looks unwell, but the young lord remains silent. Finding strength in himself and still dwelling on the memories of his past life, the boy tells his father that he is completely fine. Dale smiles at his father, trying to convince him that he is not lying, not wanting to allow unnecessary questions and guesses. Duke Sax began to think more often about his son and the development of his magical talents and the correctness of his decision. News that Duke Sax had begun teaching Dale dark magic began to spread quickly throughout the empire. The Duke's violation of his oath began to cause a huge stir in the empire. As for the man who broke this oath, he began to attract the attention of all the inhabitants of the empire, including the nobles. Absolutely all important and not so important ways focused your attention on the young lord, the son of the Duke of Saxe. This child begins to attract the attention of every high-ranking person in the country. Dale himself continues his training, ignoring the enormous involvement of others in his life. Knight Helmet also decided to fulfill his promise and began to teach him swordsmanship. The young lord works hard on the training ground and is doing quite well. The boy even manages to attack Sir Helmet, which makes him very happy. The young lord, despite the fact that the wooden sword is barely smaller than himself, treats those who handle it with great seriousness in their training. Sir Helmet doesn't even try to give in to the boy because he wants the young lord to have high skill. Before Dale could come to his senses, he suddenly saw Sir Helmet's sword in front of him and barely managed to dodge it. This forces the young lord to rush into the attack to prove that he is capable of much. Sir Helmet does not expect such a result from the young lord's attack and freezes for a moment, trying to comprehend what happened. Dale manages to knock the sword out of Sir Helmet's hand, and it ends up in his own body a few meters away from them. Sir Helmet raises his hands up and laughs with delight, noting that Dale's attack was very good. Dale suspects that a knight like Sir Helmet would never drop his sword and asks him if he did it on purpose. Sir Helmet tries to convince the young lord that this is only the result of his training and dexterity, and since he used the ball-handling technique that is used in real combat, an ordinary person would have died in the fight. Sir Helmet says that Dale's ball handling is so excellent that he can confidently say that he is a magician, while the young man looks closely at his hands. Sir Helmet approaches the young city and, sitting down next to him, notes that there has always been a knight next to the magician who protects him. Sir Helmet says this to mean that the young lord really doesn't need to train so hard. I examine the boy's hand and ask if he had a reason for doing this. Sir Helmet claims that the young city does not need to bring itself to such wounds and bandages his hand. Dale objects, noting that he certainly has such a need. Dale says it would be bad for the Duke's son to rely only on guards or protective magic, but he thinks to himself that he couldn't pass up the chance to learn fencing from one of the continent's 7 swordmasters. Sir Helmet can't help but smile and starts laughing at the young lord's words and his determination. Sir Helmet says that the young lord gave an excellent answer. If he himself had a son like Dale, he would not regret anything. Dale smiles and doesn't answer Sir Helmet that he is glad to finally receive his praise, and suddenly notices a lush green dress nearby. The Duchess comes out of the garden and is glad that her son and Sir Helmet are in high spirits. Both Dale and Sir Helmet are very surprised to see the Duchess at their training. Dale approaches his mother and asks what brought her to this place, and the Duchess replies that she really wanted to see how hard her son works. The Duchess notes that she has some news, and Dale, putting down his sword, asks what kind of news his mother has brought him. The Duchess reminds him of the birthday present Dale asked for. The young lord wonders if he probably remembers, but it would have been nice if his mother had told him about it herself. Dale remembers that she asked her parents for a younger sister for her birthday because at that age she couldn't allow herself to ask for anything else without arousing suspicion. Remembering this, Dale's eyes noticeably widen because he understands what his mother wants to tell him. The Duchess begins to smile widely and says that Dale will have to take good care of his youngest, and lightly strokes her stomach. Dale smiles widely back at her and promises that he will take care of his little sister. 10 months later, the day of birth arrives, and the Duchess gives birth to a charming baby girl, whom she immediately shows to Dale. Dale gently touches his newborn sister's cheek with his finger, and says that he still can't believe that he is now a big brother. The young lord can't take his eyes off his little sister, saying how incredibly cute she is. The Duchess sees how her son reacts to his newborn sister, and invites him to hold the girl in his arms. Dale wanted to refuse for fear of doing something wrong, but the Duchess carefully places the newborn baby on his lap. The Duke of Saxe asks his son if he thinks his little sister is very similar to him. The Duchess notes that the baby cries every time she picks her up, but never cries when her son does it. Dale looks at his sister and can't help but smile. He's so happy she's been born. Duchess Helena asks her son how he feels after holding the baby in her arms. Dale looks at his mother and replies that his little sister is light as a feather, and he is not afraid at all now. But at the same time, Dale's sister seemed very heavy from the outside, which is why he was afraid to pick her up, and he shared these thoughts with his father. The Duke of Saxe smiles and closes his eyes, feeling how happy he is at the moment. The Duke looks at his son and tells him that this is the meaning of life and he should never forget it. The Duke suggests finishing the introduction to his sister and letting her and her mother rest while they themselves go to a lesson with teacher Cipia. Lady Cipia tells the young lord that today's lesson will be practice and real combat. Dale cautiously asks the teacher if he should act seriously, and Cipia tells him not to hesitate and to attack with all his might. Dale replies that he understands everything and immediately starts casting spells. Lady Cipia is eager to see how much her student has improved. She anticipates his skills and strength will increase significantly. Dale casts a spell and launches an ice spike at the teacher. Lady Cipia deflects the attack and notes that Dale is too slow. Before he could speak, Cipia was immediately faced with a second attack and laughed to himself that this was very impudent on the part of the young lord. Holding a crystal in her hands, not Olga's, Lady Cipia smiles and asks Dale if her student is unbiased towards her. Dale is a little indignant because he tried hard to impress the teacher. Lady Cipia attacks him back and asks him to put up a barrier immediately. Dale feels confused and has difficulty taking action. Lady Cipia no longer acts so cautiously with the young lord, but shows more strength to help his skills grow. Her attack hits the young lord's arm, which he tried to cover. The ice crystal flows around the young lord's hand, and he thinks that if he hadn't blocked it, he would have been serious earlier. Lady Cipia smiles, glad that Dale managed to create ice armor in such a short time. Dale shakes his hand and the ice falls off his hand, and the boy himself feels very confident that he was able to block the attack. Lady Cipia praises the young lord and suggests they try again. Dale touches the ground with his palm and uses a molecular combination, the formula for an ice wall. Dale casts a loud spell, causing the ice wall to grow. A snow cloud rises around the young lord, and Lady Cipia is very surprised by this. The elf cannot believe that the young lord descended the ice wall in the midst of battle and is very proud of him. Lady Cipia also notes that Dale, by improving the structure of mana, has significantly increased the density of ice. Approaching the ice wall and touching it, Cipia began to wonder why Dale had decided to use a protective spell at this moment. Cipia suggested that you freak needed a break after her last attack. The elf begins to look around, hearing extraneous sounds. The elf looks at the young lord, who begins to use the ice blast, the fragmentation formula. Dale didn't want to take a break but set up a defense to strengthen his attack with an explosion. Lady Cipia watches as the energy behind the barrier begins to grow and understands what it means. The elf is amazed because she could never have expected such a spell from her student. The next moment, a powerful explosion occurs and the ice wall shatters into many pieces. Dale is very pleased that his idea worked out in the best possible way. The spell that was just cast made the strong ice wall even more compact than it was before and exploded it, and since the ice molecules were already strengthened by the compression, it practically turned into a grenade. Dale waits for the snow cloud to settle and thinks that it will probably be difficult for his teacher to avoid this attack. When the horizon became visible, the young lord discovers that Lady Cipia is nowhere to be found and is horrified by this. Upon closer inspection, Dale discovers that his teacher is standing there covered in ice. This greatly frightens him, but suddenly it becomes clear that Lady Cipia actually used some kind of spell to create her double, because she appears from behind her image and laughingly asks if Dale called her. Dale puts his arm around himself and says that Lady Cipia really scared him and suggests to himself that she must have used an illusion. Lady Cipia notes that Dale used quite an impressive technique and smiles. The teacher admits that she never thought that a simple mage of the first circle would be able to injure the elder of the magic tower. Dale regretfully says that he never meant to inflict pain on Lady Cipia. Cipia replies that she knows this very well and admits that she is grateful to him for the wound he inflicted on her. The elf explains that this situation means that he trusts her so much that he used all his power. Lady Cipia tells the young city that as his teacher she is more proud of him than words can express. And when Dale hesitantly asks if this is true, the elf asks him not to doubt it, calling him an excellent student. Lady Cipia asks Dale how he even managed to come up with such a spell formula, and he replies that it was all thanks to what she taught him. Lady Cipia accepts these words with joy. She is happy to see her student grow. As usual, Lady Cipia, after her lesson with the young lord, goes to the Duke for a talk. The Duke immediately notices a wound on the elf's cheek and asks where it came from and explains that it was careless, and she realized it when she was teaching the young master. Gertzak exhales heavily and says he's always indebted to teacher Cipia. It's clear something's bothering him. Lady Cipia replies that this is nonsense and that it is also a great joy for her to teach such a talented student as Dale. The Duke asks if he can make one more request to the elder, who replies with a smile that he is ready to listen to the Duke. The Duke explains that they received word that a group of orcs was crossing the mountain range and invading their territory, and emphasizes that there is nothing that a small cavalry unit could not handle. The Duke then says that he wants to send his son to this battle, which shocks the elder. Lady Cipia objects, explaining that young Master Dale is not yet ready for this. Duke Sax, frowning slightly, emphasizes that the young lord is not expected to fight on the front lines. The Duke rises from his chair and also says that the protection of the territory is the responsibility of the House of Saxe. Nauer Saxon is convinced that, as the Duke's heir, the young lord must understand his responsibility, and is no exception. Lady Cipia understands that she cannot object to the Duke asking how she can help and what is required of her. Duke Sax explains that he will entrust his artifact to his son, and wants Cipia to guide him until the Dales learn to control its power. Lady Cipia does not at all like this intention of the Duke towards his son, but she cannot object. An artifact is an object imbued with immense power and will. Can only be used by offering mana or life itself as payment. The more powerful the artifact, the more dangerous and uncontrollable it becomes. In some cases, this can even lead to death. In front of the Saxe House artifact vault, the Duke tells Dale that their house has long mastered the art of handling such powers. The Duke of Saxe explains to his son that he, as the heir, must also prepare for the upcoming battle. Dale reacts very positively to this news because he has been expecting for a long time to be sent to some battle where he can prove himself. The Duke explains that his son will join the squad to destroy the orc horde. Approaching the door, the Duke hesitates slightly. I explain that before that, however, my son needs to know something, and then knocks on the door. The Duke invites his son to enter the hall where the artifacts are located and explains that first he must learn to control the power of darkness that their family wields. Dale is absolutely delighted with this room filled with various artifacts he has never seen before. The Hertzes, while giving a tour, explain that these were the artifacts of the Demon King that they control, and that they have had them since their ancestors conquered the Demon King's domain. Duke Sax asks his son to never compare these to ordinary artifacts, and Dale replies that he feels powerful mana emanating from them. The Duke confirms this and explains that they all possess enormous power and are extremely dangerous, and until Dale learns to control them, he should not touch anything thoughtlessly. He looked in the direction where his son had just stood and discovered that the boy had disappeared. Gertzak begins to look around the entire hall, not understanding where the boy could have disappeared to in a second. Dale, without listening to his father, immediately turned away, wanting to find a suitable artifact for himself. Dale approaches one of the artifacts, which is a shield, and hears a voice. The artifact itself speaks to him and asks if there were people he wanted revenge on. They sense the boy's hatred. Turning around, the young lord hears from another artifact a request to choose him, so that together they can defeat all enemies. Dale understands perfectly well that these artifacts resonate with his deep grievances. The young lord smiles, thinking that this is not enough and that he actually needs something much stronger. Turning around, he sees a cloak in front of him and wonders how he got into this hall. After thinking for a bit, Dale realizes that this is a shadow cloak and he has heard about it before. During the Age of Heroes, Duke Bertha of the Demon King's army used this top-notch artifact, which has the ability to shape shadows, making it an incredibly difficult opponent. Dale decides that he should try to use this artifact and tries to put the cloak on himself. At that moment, the Duke finally finds his son and calls out to him loudly in a serious tone. Dale looks at his father but begins to feel the power of the cloak, which distracts him. The young lord seems to find himself in another dimension and only hears the hunger of the shadow cloak. This is no ordinary shadow, something Dale realizes as soon as he puts on the cloak. The one who owned the cloak in the past could summon storms of shadows and move darkness as if it were a living being. However, to truly control this shadow, the master must force the shadow creature into complete submission, and Dale thinks he can do this. The young lord, of course, understands that this will not be easy at all, and he will have to work hard to achieve the desired result. The young lord's determination is very strong, and he is ready to fight for power over the shadow. Duke Sax and Elder Cipia watch as Dale struggles to cope with the artifact's power. Lady Cipia soon wonders if they should worry since so much time has passed, and the Duke replies that if this continues, Dale will lose his mind and be eaten by a shadow creature. Lady Cipia shudders at the Duke's words, and he says that they will have to pull the boy out by force. But the Duke doesn't have time to take any action. Suddenly, a blinding flash appears in the hall. The shadow around Dale dissipates, and the Duke and the Elder immediately rush to him. Dale smiles contentedly and shows with his whole appearance that he is completely fine. Lady Cipia decides to approach the boy and make sure that he is really okay, but the Duke remains standing. Syria tells the young lord that he made her worry, but Dale laughs and says that the shadow creature only slightly touched him. The Duke does not understand how his son managed to remain unharmed and how a child was able to master such a powerful artifact. The young lord approaches his father and states that he has a certain question. Dale touched the situation and the other artifacts too. The Duke and the Elder freeze in place upon hearing the young lord's request. Thus begins Dale's exploration of the Sax family's artifact vault, which took all day and all night. A few days later, at the Duke's family's training grounds, Sir Helmet is astonished to see that the young master has a shadow cloak. Dale laughs loudly and confirms that the thing he is wearing is indeed a shadow cloak. Sir Helmet notes that people say that this artifact is incredibly difficult to control and asks if the young lord is really alright, to which he replies that he is perfectly fine except for a slight tingling sensation. Sir Helmet scratches his head in confusion as the young lord says that the cloak must have been alone for a long time. Dale says that as soon as he saw the cry, he immediately stuck to it. The young lord starts laughing loudly again, suggesting that maybe this cloak just wanted to be friends with him. Sir Helmet is even more surprised that the young lord calls something dangerous lonely and calls Dale a very kind boy. Dale thanks Uncle Helmet and doesn't show that the cloak brings him any discomfort and constantly tries to bite his legs. The young lord approaches Sir Helmet and declares that he has a certain request for him. The young lord declares that he would like to arrange a real Sparran as a combat practice, which greatly surprises the knight. In fact, the knight had been waiting for this offer for a very long time and immediately took a fighting stance, noting that of course he could do it. Dale thinks to himself that meeting one of the continent's 7 sword masters might still prove to be an impossible task for him, as his aura alone is terrifying. Sir Helmet asks the young lord not to be afraid, promising that he will fight him using only the basics of fencing and without using aura. Dale wonders if the knight means he won't be so cruel to him, but he doesn't particularly like it when someone gives in. Dale believes that a knight should fight seriously because this is their credo. The Lord's true purpose in this sparring is not the duel itself, but to practice using the shadow cloak. The power of the weapon the young lord can create from his shadow creations determines the true value of the artifact, and this battle becomes a necessary test. The young lord primarily uses the shadow blade throw. Sir Helmet is a bit surprised by this blow but copes well. Sir Helmet deflects Dale's blow with ease, swinging his sword. Dale is very amazed that Sir Helmet can repel a magical attack with just his physical strength. Sir Helmet shouts that Dale's attacks are simply superb. The knight doesn't stand still, constantly moving around the field, awaiting the next blow. Thinking the young lord needs a shake-up, Sir Helmet warns that he is going to attack. The young lord dodges and takes a few sharp steps back, applying defense. Dale uses the power of the shadow sword to block the knight's strike and counterattack him. Sir Helmet tries to dodge the shadow spikes that appeared straight from the ground. The knight grins, noting that the young lord launched a surprise attack, and now he wants to know even more what will happen next. Dale casts another spell, also enhanced by the power of the shadow cloak. A spiked bolt of electrical shadow energy is aimed at Sir Helmet. This attack requires some effort on Dale's part. Before Sir Helmet attacks, Dale uses another skill and sets up a defense. The knight is shocked that the young lord was able to block his strike, even though he struck with enough force to break normal swords in half. The knight now understands the difference between a regular weapon and a high-level artifact. Sir Helmet offers the young lord 10 more exchanges, and the sparring continues. That day, the knights watching the duel whispered incredulously. None of them ever lasted more than 2 exchanges with Captain Helmet. During training, the knights feel an indescribable wall appear between them and Dale. A few days later, on the day of deployment, the Duchess sees Dale off and promises to talk to his father. The Duchess says that she shouldn't think about it. She still can't let her son go to such a dangerous place, but the young lord claims that she shouldn't worry because he will be with his father and Uncle Helmet. The Duchess is afraid that something might go wrong and her son will get hurt, but Dale just rolls his eyes. Dale tells his mother that he needs to become stronger so that he can one day bear the burden of the duchy. Dale looks at his sister and says that when the time comes he will need strength to protect both his sister Liz and his parents, so he needs experience. Dale looks at his mother's upset face, but still asks her to give him the opportunity to become strong enough to protect her. The Duchess understands that she cannot change anything and smiles at her son, saying that he can go. The Duchess sees him off and waits until the young lord mounts his horse and he rides off to the real battle. Dale jumps on the horse and turns around, promising his mother that he will return soon. The journey must last until dawn. When the entire detachment is assembled, Sir Helmet notifies the Duke that they can set out. Duke Saxe, having examined the entire detachment, gives his consent to the Knight Helmet, but it is clear that something is troubling him. The Duke begins to move forward and asks Dale to give the order to set out on his behalf, which shocks the boy. The Duke turns to his son with a stern look and remarks that one day he will command their proud cavalry corps, the Black Cavalry. The Duke tries to convey to his son that these knights are his. Dale thinks that the knights are actually his, not Han's sons. The young lord rejoices at his first battle as a leader and promises himself that this time everything will be different. The young lord turns to the squad and declares that the time to move out has come. The young lord raises his hand up, shouting that the proud swords of House Saxe are moving forward. The entire Black Cavalry responds with one voice to the words of their young lord. 250 cavalrymen and an electron unit of rangers stationed in the White Mountains, known as the White Guards, are taking part in this operation. The target is about 1,000 orcs, and the path to them will not be entirely easy. The orcs cross the mountains, heading upstream along the Saxe River to escape the cold and hunger. Soon they must move downstream. Dale decides to strike first, crossing the lower mouth of the Saxe River and setting up an ambush there. There is only one way for 250 people to quickly cross a deep river. The elder of the blue magic tower Cipia helps them cross the river. She asks the group to spread out to the sides and give her a clear view of the river. Lady Cipia decides to build an ice bridge that can cross even such a river. Dale is happy to see the elf and is glad that she came all this way to help them despite her emphasis on pacifism and harmony. Lady Cipia uses her magical powers and sends an icy stream rushing towards the opposite bank. The elf turns to the squad and notes that they can now safely cross the bridge. Cipia makes the Duke and his squad victorious, but he asks the elder to accept his gratitude for these words. Dale turns to the teacher and happily says that he is also going to this battle. Cipia watches Dale go and smiles, but doesn't intend to go any further. The elder feels a certain strangeness when looking at the young lord. Cipia can't believe that a student could make his teacher worry so much. The elder really begins to think a lot about this wonderful smiling child who is achieving such success. A few moments later, the battle begins at the orcs' temporary base. A hidden squad of Winter Guard Rangers set up an ambush and emerging from cover begins to carry out the first attack. Sneaking up on the orcs, the archers fire flaming arrows at the orc base. The orcs begin to grow restless and try to group together for protection. Although a small number of orcs are defeated by the rangers' archers. The orc leader roars loudly calling on the others to attack. The commander-in-chief of the Rangers sends the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Cavalry battalions into the attack. The cavalry lines up and prepares to attack in a matter of seconds. Duke Sax, his son, and the Knight Helmet stand on a hill observing everything from a distance. The Duke asks Dale what impressions he gets from this spectacle. Since each horse's hooves hit the ground twice per second, Dale, his father, and Sir Helmet were traveling at least 40 kilometers per hour. Given the combined weight of the riders and their armor, the force of the impact must have been enormous, Dale estimated. When spears of 3 to 4 meters in length are fixed in place, this is the spear formation enhanced by the knight's aura, and even the orcs cannot prevent it. Dale notes that the game is completely one-sided, with which the Duke of Saxe agrees, explaining that such is the power of the cavalry corps of which their duchy is proud. Sir Helmet asks the young lord not to relax because the battle could turn the other way at any moment. The knight emphasizes that what the young lord sees is only the beginning and that they should be prepared. The orcs line up and cover themselves tightly with shields through which they can only push their long spears. The ranger commander notes that their ambush worked, but not enough to destroy the orcs. They should retreat and regroup and then finish the job with successive attacks. A huge artificial star lights up in the sky. The order is given for all units to retreat. The rumble of cavalry hooves is heard again and clouds of dust rise. The orcs are perplexed by the fact that the battle seems to have stopped and are talking among themselves about their next steps. The orcs understand that they should not let the enemy squad escape. The orcs decide to run after the cavalry so as not to give them a chance to rest. Well, I understand that they can't keep up with the fast horses and decide to throw their spears at the detachment of people, which is much more effective. One of the spears thrown by the orc pierces the horse of one of the cavalrymen. The young lord immediately notices that one of the warriors is in serious danger without his horse. Dale hears his father call this warrior unfortunate and slightly purses his lips in displeasure. Duke Sax notes that one knight has been killed, but Dale does not understand why his father thinks the man is beyond help. One of the orcs immediately noticed that the knight had fallen from her horse and ran towards him swinging his sword. The young lord turns to his father and the knight and asks why they are simply watching this instead of trying to do something about it. The knight and the duke look at each other and look at the young lord with bewilderment. Dale looks back at the knight and thinks that if he goes there to him on horseback it will be too late. Dale realizes that from this distance he will need to pierce the orc's tough hide with one shot, but the orc's hide is much thicker than that of other monsters. Dale comes to the conclusion that he will have to change the ice bolt formula, and perhaps adding a precision sniper formula and a ballistic trajectory equation for stability might help. The young lord immediately begins changing the formula for the ice bolt, trying to do it as quickly as possible. Dale watches closely the orc, who has already gotten too close to the knight who fell from his horse. A moment later, the young lord attacks with an ice-transformed bolt aiming at the orc. Sir Helmet, observing the attack made by the young lord, notes that the distance was considerable, but the boy's accuracy was very high. Dale decides that he can't stand still any longer and he rushes forward. Sir Helmet tries to ask the boy where he is going, but Gertzak asks the knight to leave the boy alone. The Duke is surprised that Dale at his age created an original magical formula with such a level of destructive power, and assumes that his son's inner world must already be close to completion. Dale is very focused on the task he has set for himself and believes that he must perform as well as possible in this battle. The young lord quickly assesses the situation and realizes that the remaining orcs are already regrouping. Dale, looking at the knight, quickly realizes that he is now faced with two problems. First, his body freezes in panic as he falls. Secondly, his original formula is too long and ineffective for combat use, and now the boy understands why he is studying a simplified formula and decides that he should shorten his own as well. Dale, jumping to the aid of the knight, who is already approaching another orc, suggests that he should use the Ice Magnum 98 caliber. Dale doubts that his formula is still too long, but after some thought he decides that it might work. Dale, without stopping his horse, uses an ice bullet and aims at the orc. The knight turns around and sees the young gentleman and feels confused. He is not sure that the boy will be able to help him again. The knight only manages to dodge the flow of powerful energy from the young lord, and all his doubts are dispelled. An ice bullet pierces the head of a huge orc and thus saves the knight's life once again. The knight turns to the young lord and asks why he would do this for someone like him. Dale gallops towards the knight and dismounts nearby. The young lord asks the knight not to worry about it and smiles at him. Dale says that the House of Saxe will never give up its faithful sword and puts his hand on his heart. The knight tries to get to his feet but doesn't see that two more orcs are running behind him. The orcs raise their roar, already anticipating fresh blood. Dale is fully focused and casts another spell without hesitation. This time the young lord uses the shadow blade and attacks two orcs at once. The shadow breaks out of the young lord's hand and rushes towards the orcs, who are immediately lost on the battlefield, not expecting such magic. In an instant, the monster receives severe damage. Dale smiles and orders the shadow blade to destroy the orcs. One of the orcs freezes in place, having no options on how to defend himself from such magic. The shadow blade hits him first, producing a powerful magical explosion. The orc's head flies several meters to the side, landing near another orc. The monster feels fear and doubts whether he will be able to defeat a small human child with such powers. Only bones remain of the orc's comrade, as if he had been gnawed by wild, hungry animals. Dale looks at the orc frozen in fear and starts laughing at the fact that he still hasn't run away. The young lord uses the ice bullet again and hits the orc, who doesn't even try to escape his death. Dale turns to the knight, declaring that he is finished, and smiles at him, but the knight says that his legs can no longer move. Dale is not at all upset or confused by this news. The young lord picks up the paralyzed knight in his arms and repeats once again that they did it together. By this time, Sir Helmet approaches the boy with his squad, and he says that he must do the rest. Sir Helmet calls upon his entire cavalry detachment and gives the command to attack. The knights rush forward straight at the orcs. They shout that they fight for House Saxon and are proud of it. At the Saxon base sometime later, the Duke speaks to his son and informs him that they have successfully completed the operation to destroy the orcs. The Duke explains that he called his son because he wants to ask him something. He asks his son to explain why he rushed alone into the enemy's rear. The Duke is very unhappy with his son's behavior and wants to understand why he did something so reckless. Dale immediately senses his father's serious tone, but doesn't understand why he is being scolded. Dale concentrates as much as possible and promises his father that he will explain to him in detail why he did this. Dale notes that his father said the Knights of House Saxe are the people he himself will one day lead. The Duke listens attentively to his son, trying to understand. Dale explains that he was simply doing his duty as befits his rank, and these words bring a smile to the Duke's face. But despite the fact that the Duke is very proud of his son, he tells him that the arguments are unconvincing. Dale doesn't understand why his father behaves this way. Although he is famous for caring for his knights, he wonders if he can ask his father why he stood by and watched his knight die. The Duke explains that the territory of the Northern Demon King, under the control of the Saxon household, is constantly being attacked by hordes of monsters, and the knights fighting on the front lines do not draw their swords in the hope of saving themselves. Dale states that he still hoped that his father would save his faithful knight, to which the Duke asks whether he should have acted as Dale did. The Duke explains to his son that he has forced those who must think and act to survive on the battlefield to believe that someone will save them. Dale, hearing his father, understands what he means and what mistake he himself made. The Duke asks his son how many knights with such a mindset should survive, but the young man does not find an answer. The Duke approaches his son and explains that the knights of their territory are constantly sharpening their blades to counter the threats that surround them, and only when they reach their limit will he personally stop these threats, and this is a noble duty that the House of Saxe must fulfill. Dale mentally agrees that his father is right because this is a logical truth that he cannot refute and which he even knew in his past life but for some reason he forgot. The Duke gently places his hand on his son's shoulder, but the young lord feels a strong tension and tries to dodge. The Duke smiles and notes that the way Dale acted according to his will was very impressive and asks him to never lose such will of spirit. The Duke opens the curtains leading to the entrance to the tent and the young lord is blinded by the sun. The Duke invites his son to return to the castle noting that they have completed their mission and can be free. The story of the Duke's young heir who attacked a horde of orcs to save a single wounded knight quickly became the Empire's favorite gossip. This was mostly true with a little exaggeration which came from different storytellers trying to make their story as vivid as possible. It's spreading across the Empire like wildfire and Dale is feeling very uncomfortable about it. Although the young lord involved in this story found it embarrassing, the incident began to give the duchy new energy. A few days later the young lord finds himself back on the training grounds and all the knights who have already gathered there kneel before him noting that it is a great honor for them to get to know him better. Dale, very embarrassed, asks the knights to rise noting that this is not absolutely necessary. The young lord can't get used to the way people around him treat him. Sir Helmet laughs and asks the young lord to be proud of the fact that he commands such respect from the knights. Sir Helmet raises his hand up to attract attention and remarks that for the sake of the future young master they must all become even stronger and the others pick up on this. Dale smiles at how all the knights strive to show him their loyalty and respect. The young lord's thoughts about his own importance are interrupted by a maid's address. The girl says that guests from the Orhart house have arrived. Dale smiles and thanks the maid Eva for this news, and Sir Helmet notes that in that case it is time for them to go back to the castle. Dale walks back to the castle smiling and thinks that it seems like soon they will all welcome a special guest. The House of Martial Arts Orhart is held by Patriarch Bardel, a divine sword, who was once a nobleman in the fallen kingdom of Teutonia. When the Empire began the War of Unification, the kingdom and the divine sword perished, and along with them the House of Orhart. Everything is ablaze with fire and the former grandeur of this house instantly disappeared. Dale notices the knight's expression change slightly, and he assumes that the knight is probably remembering the divine sword of the man who knighted him. The young lord understands that a meeting between a knight and a guest from the Orhart house could be very awkward. When the young lord and the knight enter the throne room, he discovers that his parents are already gathered there, and the Duke immediately asks his son if he was at training. At that moment, the butler enters the hall and announces that the guests have arrived, and the Duke asks to escort them into the hall with respect. A woman enters the hall followed by a young girl, and Dale is surprised that they arrived at Saxe's house without an escort. A woman approaches the Duke of Saxe and bowing introduces herself as Vanessa Orhart, humble servant of the Grand Duke of Saxe. The woman turns around and looks a little threateningly at the young girl who came with her. Vanessa Orhart introduces this girl as her daughter Charlotte Orhart, which for some reason makes her express her displeasure. Dale immediately understands that the girl is trying to say something, but he doesn't yet understand what exactly. Charlotte is outraged that her mother bows her head before the Duke, and Duchess, the woman, tries to pacify her. The Duke raises his hand indicating that he will speak and notes that Charlotte had to endure a lot to make such a long journey. The Duke looks at his son and asks him to take Lady Charlotte around the castle a little, and he happily agrees. Dale offers Lady Charlotte his hand and smiling asks her to come with him. The girl grimaces and directly expresses that she does not want to go anywhere, especially with this young lord. Lady Charlotte jerks her hand and screams that no one should dare touch her. Dale is a little confused, not understanding why this girl is reacting this way. The Duke and Duchess look at this girl with horror and are clearly not happy with her behavior in their house. Lady Charlotte realizes she has made a mistake and looks at the Duke and Duchess with fear. But nevertheless her fear is not enough to shut her mouth, and she calls everyone present shameless imperial nobles, although her mother asks her to immediately apologize for such words. Lady Charlotte clicks her tongue and immediately heads for the exit, not wanting to put up with this. Dale immediately goes after her and asks the girl to wait for him a little. Vanessa Orhart apologizes to the Duke and Duchess for her daughter's insolence, explaining that she is not usually like this, but after recent events her emotions are unstable. The Duchess, clutching her face with empathy, asks what happened in the house. Vanessa says that not long ago Count Brandenburgg appointed a new manager to their territory. The woman notes that this man is known as the Holy Knight of the Empire, and the Duke and Duchess must have heard of him, but he is as infamous as he is famous, and it is not for nothing that he is called the King of Pigs. Throughout the Empire, it is said that in order to produce a very talented heir, Count Brandenburgg strives to lay his seed in any experienced swordsman. Vanessa notes that this happens even if the person is her daughter who has not yet reached adulthood. Vanessa angrily says that her daughter barely managed to escape before he could touch her, but it is impossible to erase such horror from memory. Vanessa declares that she wants to protect her daughter, which causes the Duchess to burst into tears, and the Duke is immersed in his own thoughts, realizing that something terrible is happening. Vanessa explains that as a fallen nobleman her power is limited and begins to beg the Duke and Duchess to accept her daughter as a servant of the House of Saxe, so that the counts can never raise a hand against her again. At the same time, Charlotte and Dale arrive at the training ground. Dale ran after her for a long time, and when he caught up with her, he asked her to listen to him at least for a little while. The young lord asks Lady Charlotte if she even knows where she is going. The girl replies that she doesn't care. Charlotte looks at the young lord and asks if everything is okay with his hand, to which he assures the girl that there is nothing to worry about. Lady Charlotte smiles, slightly glad that she did not cause any harm to the young lord, while Dale thinks about what happened to the girl, because even if she behaves unfriendly, she still remains a child. Lady Charlotte immediately begins training and draws her sword from its sheath. She wants to duel the young master and points her sharp sword at him. Dale stands there a little confused, unsure if he should take up such a challenge. Lady Charlotte calls upon Dale of the House of Saxony to draw his sword and accept her challenge. Dale realizes at this point that Charlotte is simply doing whatever she wants. Charlotte continues to insist that the young lord of House Saxe fight her. Dale smiles at his guest and explains that first he needs a reason why he should agree. Charlotte replies that she has heard many rumors about an incredible man who single-handedly killed 1,000 orcs to save a fallen knight. Dale smiles broadly at Lady Charlotte's words, who apparently understands perfectly well that this is all just an embellished story. Charlotte is serious about winning against the one who is said to have no equal in the Empire and proving to the whole world that she is stronger. Charlotte thinks that then everyone will understand that she can protect her home from that person, and at that moment Dale asks again who she means. Charlotte replies that she means Count Brandenburgg, the Holy Warrior. Dale freezes in place upon hearing the name of the one who has been his enemy since his past life. Dale admits to himself that he will never be able to forget this man who is simply a dog of the Empire who stabbed him in the back. Dale couldn't imagine that he would hear his name right here. And at that moment he realizes that he and Charlotte have the same goal, and she could become a good ally for him, although first she needs a dose of reality. And they silently turn around and go to the barrel where the swords are kept. Taking the sword in his hands, Dale notes that Charlotte is just a child who knows nothing, which makes the girl very angry. Dale challenges Charlotte to attack him with all her might and shows that he is ready for this battle. Charlotte grits her teeth and says she was already going to do it. Lady Charlotte begins to gain speed and rushes towards the young lord. I believe that she is definitely stronger than him. With all her might, Charlotte launches a punch, but the young lord easily blocks it. With just a little effort, the young lord easily throws Lady Charlotte back. Charlotte doesn't give up and attacks Dale again despite the difference in their strength. No matter how hard Charlotte tries, Dale easily deflects all her blows with a completely calm face. But Charlotte can also counter every attack from Dale by flicking her wrists and even using aura slightly and using it to wield a rapier that is too large for her frame. Dale finds this similar to a mage who generates mana through a circle in his heart. The knight accumulates an aura in his body that exceeds human capabilities. The duel between the young lord and Lady Charlotte continues, and Dale mentally notes to himself that the girl is truly a knight to the core. Charlotte has determination and courage, and her skills are at a high level. Charlotte is confident and knows what she's doing, even though Dale initially doubted her. She manages to break through his block and nearly injures him. Dale turns to face her and continues to fight, trying to fend off her piercing attacks. Lady Charlotte thinks that at this level the advantage was on her side, and this gives her even more strength. When the girl was born, her father was no longer in this world, but every night her mother told stories about him. Vanessa told her daughter that she must protect their home in her father's stead as the proud daughter of the divine sword. Even when their kingdom has fallen and their home has crumbled, her sword never slows. Charlotte continued to train hard and achieved great success, but now she does not understand why the young lord continues to stop her sword. She was confident until the very end that she was stronger than him and many other lords, but after entering into a duel with Dale, she began to feel her weakness in comparison to him. Dale noticed how Lady Charlotte's mood changed and realized that something was wrong. Dale watches intently as Lady Charlotte picks up speed and rushes straight towards him, but he freezes in place, trying to anticipate her next move. Lady Charlotte draws her sword, confident that she can wound the young lord, but at the very last moment he dodges and blocks her sword. With one easy movement, the young lord knocks Charlotte's ball aside. Lady Charlotte is outraged and mentally repeats to herself that the daughter of the divine sword cannot be defeated. The loss of her weapon is a major blow to her self-esteem. Charlotte falls to her knees and asks Dale why she can't beat him. The young lord explains that the reason is that she is not a divine sword like her father. Bill says that the girl's pride as the daughter of a divine sword is justified, but in her current state she will not be able to protect her home from such a person. Dale watches Lady Charlotte cry but continues to tell her that the holy warrior's sword is tens of times stronger than his. Lady Charlotte looks up at the young lord and asks what she should do in such a case. The girl is confused and humiliated. She got into this duel herself and lost. Dale states his name, and the house promises Lady Charlotte that he swears on the name of his family to become the protector of the House of Orhart, which surprises Charlotte. Dale explains that he will be her protector until the day she becomes strong enough to defeat her abuser herself. Until then, his house will be her shield. Dale smiles, though Lady Charlotte can't see his face. He's glad to say the words. Lady Charlotte doesn't understand why Dale is making such a promise to her, and he hands her the sword and explains that it's worth it. Dale asks Lady Charlotte to also swear that she will become a sword for him and the House of Saxe. Lady Charlotte takes her sword back and asks how she can refuse it. The girl gets down on one knee and, holding her sword, swears in her knightly honor that she will become the sword of the House of Saxe. It may have seemed like a simple childish promise, but the determination behind it was strong enough to be called a vow. Lady Charlotte and Dale swore an oath to each other, confident that each of them would keep their word. That same day, late in the evening, the young lord goes to his father's office, who tells him that at the request of Lady Orhart, Lady Charlotte has become a maid at the Saxe house. The Duke also noted that it was a big surprise that the girl agreed to this without hesitation and asked if anything had happened between his son and that girl. Dale admits that he and Charlotte made a promise to each other, and he swore in the name of House Saxe to protect House Orhart. The Duke, hearing these words, begins to frown, not fully understanding his son's behavior. The Duke asks if his son mentioned their family's name out of pity, which Dale immediately denies. The Duke asks what his son wants to get from this promise, and Dale replies that Charlotte is the only heir to the divine sword and her talent is exceptional. Dale says that they made a new vow together. The Duke is very surprised to hear that his son is seeking to obtain a new divine sword that will be wielded for the benefit of their duchy. Still, the Duke smiles upon hearing this and agrees with his son. Dale responds to his father with a smile, thinking that the last representative of the divine sword line is now under his roof, and this is an excellent blow to Count Brandenburgh. At the same time, in Melbourne, the capital of Old Teutonia, loud curses are heard in the castle. Bottles of wine fly across the hall, smashing into pieces. Count Brandenburgh is outraged that the arrogant, insolent man dares to act first. The Count scolds his men for failing to capture even one little girl. The Count is informed that assassins were sent, but they were killed before reaching Saxe's house. There is a suspicion that Charlotte Orhart fought them off herself. Count Brandenburgh remains silent but thinks that his people are simply useless trash who are not capable of anything. Count Brandenburgh is beside himself with rage. He paces his office and decides to approach the ball hanging on the stand. The Count walks up to the ball and runs his fingers over it, lightly brushing off the dust, and thinks about what good times there were when he used it. The Count remembers how he mortally wounded Han's son with this same sword. The Count raises his holy sword Durendal and asks him with a smile if he agrees with this. Stroking the blade of his sword, the Count addresses Charlotte, calling her his bride, and asks her to wait a little, promising to find the perfect heir who will inherit her after him no matter the cost. The Count asks his servant to contact the Thieves' Guild and send people to the Duke's territory. The Count also notes that they should pay as much as they ask. And after bringing Charlotte to him, he called her an unhappy girl. A week has passed since Charlotte swore allegiance, and after settling into the ducal residence, she undergoes intensive training as a maid. Charlotte also makes daily sparring with Dale part of her routine, and they are trained by the Knight Helmet. Dale comes to training, and when the knight asks if he is ready, confirms his intention to begin the battle. Charlotte always looks very serious and focused, and also shows her readiness to start a duel. Knight Helmet smiles, seeing that the children are in the mood and are fully prepared. As soon as the knight says they can begin, Charlotte and Dale immediately clasp their swords. Dale spends most of the duel smiling like a Charlotte. He really enjoys testing his guest's strength as well as proving himself. Charlotte is always determined to win and does not react to the smiles and taunts of the young lord. Dale takes their duel more than seriously and is also always determined to win, although he sometimes allows himself an extra smile on the battlefield. Charlotte Autumn successfully repels any attacks from the lord but also deals her own. The knight watches with delight as these two talented children achieve ever greater success in swordsmanship. Sometimes Helmet doesn't even believe that he's actually watching a duel between children who haven't even matched the knights yet, but their thirst for murder and speed are astounding. The knight cannot tear his gaze away from such a spectacle and understands that he could never have imagined that he would have the chance to see something like this. Dale moves very dexterously and confidently on the battlefield and never takes his eyes off his opponent. Dale always wears a robe, which also plays a significant role in his success in battle. Charlotte is trying her best to surpass the young lord in strength. Soon the girl succeeds in winning the battle. Knight Helmet stops Charlotte's sword and declares her a great job. Charlotte grimaces and asks the knight to spare her empty compliments and asks him to explain what she lacks. The knight smiles and asks Charlotte if she knows what a rapier is, to which the girl replies that it is a thrusting blow. The knight denies this and explains that the true essence lies in the work of the legs. The knight reveals that while young Master Dale dodged her blow, he was simultaneously closing the distance. At this point, Charlotte should increase the gap and wait for the opening. The more the girl bends and straightens her arm with the rapier, the more her blade trembles, and the less accurate her strikes become. The knight suggests that Charlotte needs to rebuild her foundations from scratch, which angers her. Helmet says that he has noticed this for a long time, but her posture and footwork are not polished and unusual, to which Charlotte explains that she has never had a real teacher before. Helmet responds by saying that now that he is with her, he will have to correct her strange Fedhavanai, which begins to anger the girl even more, and together with the knight they begin to laugh loudly. Helmet explains that he was just teasing Charlotte and she looked so cute that he couldn't resist. Dale, looking at Charlotte, wonders how quickly she will grow up under the guidance of Sir Helmet, one of the 7 sword masters of the continent, and thinks that if he does not try, then perhaps he will soon catch up with us. The process for creating a mana circle is essentially the same. Feel the flow of mana circulating through your heart and wait until it becomes stable. Then draw a pattern on your body in the form of a mana ring, but the problem is that this can take decades. Lady Cipia is very surprised when she learns that young Lord Dale has already completed the formation of the second circle. In this world, a mage's mana consumption is measured in revolutions per minute. A typical first circle Mach rotates around 300 revolutions per minute. Currently, the rotation speed of the first Dale circle is 2000 revolutions per minute, while the rotation speed of the second circle is about 400 revolutions per minute. To expand a new circle, at least 300 revolutions per minute is required, meaning Dale has already met the requirements for the third circle. Dale thinks that since he's made it through the second round, maybe he should try an experiment. The young lord decides to try to improve the existing ice bullet and strengthen the molecular bonds to increase its mass and hardness. Dale then decides to design a larger bore to increase spin and speed. Dale decides to create an armor-piercing bullet from an ice bullet, which is many times more effective. As soon as Dale perfects the formulas for his spell, he immediately decides to put it into practice. Dale fires an armor-piercing bullet in front of him, punching a huge hole in the rock. Dale is very surprised and does not quite understand what happened and wonders if it was always so easy to create an armor-piercing bullet, because it was similar to the influence of an additional circle, which is very large. Lady Cipia praises the young lord, who as always learns very quickly. Dale assures that this is all thanks to his teacher and notes that he will always be grateful to her. Lady Cipia thinks that from saving a knight from an orc horde to what happened to Charlotte, he always uses his power for the right reasons. At the same time, the elder is sometimes frightened by the young lord, but at the same time, he inspires even more confidence. Lady Cipia hugs the boy tightly and declares that he is truly her wonderful student. Dale was very embarrassed at this moment. He hadn't expected the teacher to hug him so tightly, or that she was so casual about physical contact. That same day in the courtyard of the duchy, Dale stands and reflects on the fact that the elder really scared him. The young lord thinks that Cipia might actually see him as a child and tries in every way to push away all thoughts about what happened. Dale tries to focus only on his training and makes the ice wall rise. A huge ice wall appears right in front of him, which he wants to use to test other spells. He is trying to perfect an ice bullet that will be moderately destructive but not weak. He calibers the ice bullet to 12 and fires it at the ice wall. The many bullets that Dale fires one after another get stuck in the ice wall created earlier. Ice bullets fly across the courtyard under the young lord's direction. Dale, however, protects himself with a barrier that prevents the bullets from harming him. After a little practice, the young lord decides that next time he will try to adapt the bullet to the Jacques. After finishing his training, Dale hears someone calling him and immediately turns towards the voice. Charlotte emerges from behind the tree with a sword in her hand and notes that she now knows where he practices. Dale is surprised that Charlotte also chose this place, and she explains that she was practicing the leg movements that Sir Helmet taught her. Dale notes that Charlotte apparently really enjoys learning fencing and is surprised that someone has noticed and confirmed this. Charlotte very timidly tries to talk to Dale about what happened between them before. The girl apologizes to the young lord for behaving so terribly and tells him what she thought about how rude she was. Dale, looking thoughtful, agreed that Charlotte had indeed been very rude and that she wanted to disappear into thin air upon hearing it. But Dale turned to her and, smiling broadly, assured her that this time he would forgive the girl. Dale confirms that he doesn't hold any grudge against Charlotte, and Charlotte immediately changes the subject by saying that she really likes the weather here. Charlotte says she can swing a sword until late at night, and the air immediately cools her down, and Dale listens to her attentively. He looks at Charlotte and realizes that they are not very similar to each other. He really enjoys thinking that someone else feels the same way as he does, and it makes him a little happy. Dale and Charlotte are watched from the window by the Duke and Duchess, who are amazed at how quickly time flies. The Duchess notes that their son is already at an age when he can look at girls, and the Duchess asks his wife if she thinks the children look very good together. Duchess Helena laughs and emphasizes that she and her husband will have to keep a close eye on them. Dale understands perfectly well that everything has already been decided for him, and it is his mother's duty to guide her son on the right path so that he can be honest in his feelings. Moments later, on the borders of the duchy, Duchess Elena serves a beggar food and some kind of bundle as Dale watches with a smile. In urban slums where the streets are filled with beggars and homeless people, the Duchess is often seen offering assistance. Every week, Elena delivers food and essentials and helps organize work. Starting this year, Dale and Charlotte also began working alongside the Duchess. Dale is distracted for just a second, and Charlotte immediately turns her attention to some unfortunate child. A little boy tugs at Charlotte's hand and asks her to help, crying loudly. Charlotte's expression immediately changes when the boy explains that his mother is in great danger. The boy does not stop crying and continues to beg Charlotte to help him and save his mother. Dale follows Charlotte and the boy and thinks that this all looks very suspicious. Dale doesn't like that they've separated from their nightly escorts and are walking through a tangled network of alleys, and he doesn't like the fact that the request was addressed to any adult but Charlotte. Dale tries to keep up with Charlotte, who is very worried about what the child told her. Walking down an alley, Dale notices a man and for some reason immediately assumes he's from the Thieves' Guild. Dale guesses Charlotte was summoned to this place for a reason. The boy asks Charlotte to wait, promising to bring his mother. Charlotte agrees, although she feels a little confused, and Dale keeps looking around. As soon as the boy disappears behind the alley, a man comes out from there. The man smiles, takes out his sword, and asks Charlotte and Dale what such precious children are doing in such a dangerous place. Charlotte immediately turns around and sees that she and Dale are surrounded. The man explains that he only has business with the little lady, who is next to the young lord, and suggests that Dale leave quietly. The man warns that if the young lord behaves inappropriately in this place, he may get hurt. Dale, with a smile on his face, states his name and home and repeats his oath to protect the daughter of Orhart. The young lord emphasizes that he is protecting Lady Charlotte from such cutthroats as are now standing in their way. The thugs from the Thieves' Guild are increasingly dragging children into the circle. The man laughs, noting that the aristocrat's nobility is truly worthy of admiration. The thug emphasizes that it would be better for the young gentleman to take into account the time and circumstances, and at the same time other thieves are revealed who are starting to approach Charlotte. Thug says that apparently the young gentleman who does not want to leave the road will have to experience some of the pain that this world has to offer. Charlotte presses her back against Dale's and whispers in his ear that she forgot her sword, but he asks the girl not to be afraid, assuring her that everything is fine. Dale thinks this is a great opportunity to try out his new shadow cloak technique under the guise of self-defense. Dale carefully watches the movements of the thugs, who decided to immediately rush into attack. Charlotte looks around, trying to count the number of enemies and just in case find an option to escape. One of the attacking thugs suddenly notices that the wind is somehow getting stronger. Dale is not at all nervous and is very confident that the Thieves' Guild will lose this fight. The main thug shouts at his men to dodge and starts calling them names. Dale notes that whoever noticed something amiss must be a high-ranking thief and the leader of all the others. At the same time, he feels completely safe, and even a high-ranking thief doesn't frighten him. With almost no effort, Dale manages to seriously frighten the other thieves, who are confused by the magic being used. The new shadow cloak technique Dale discovered after reaching the second circle gives him courage by creating shadows as parasites. These parasites move independently to kill the undead, and controlling them requires no energy. They find their target and strike it themselves. The leader of the Thieves' Guild watches with annoyance as some boy easily deals with his men. The thug cannot explain some of the young lord's actions, seeing them for the first time. Suddenly, a huge creature with long claws and a wide mouth, which is exactly twice as tall as an ordinary person, appears next to the young lord. The thieves immediately realize that this creature is undead, and they have very little chance of defeating it. The guild leader shouts at his subordinates, urging them to rush in and kill the creature as quickly as possible. The leader believes that the son of a duke, no matter what house, should die from a simple swing of a blade. He intends to personally take the boy's life. Having sent all his men to their death in battle with the undead, the chieftain tries to sneak up on the young lord unnoticed. The leader circles around Dale, trying to confuse him and make him lose his focus. The thief thinks that in these alleys no one can resist his aura-infused killing technique. The thief attacks the duke's son, but his magical attack is ineffective against Dale's shadow defense. The thief hopes that his personal blade will help him break through the shadow defense, and he makes an attack from the jump. The thief wanted to attack the boy and jumped high up. Dale watches his opponent closely and casts another spell with perfect timing and aim. Dale fires a volley of ice bullets at the thief, which pierce his body. Some of the bullets hit the thief himself and hit his men, who are far behind. Charlotte is hiding around the corner of the alley at this time, but she is very worried about Dale and the fact that she cannot help him without her own sword. Realizing that there is serious danger behind her, Charlotte decides to leave her hiding place. The undead, under the control of the young lord, continue to seek profit. Dale, looking at the wounded thief, assumes that he will not die from one shot because the owners of the aura are really very strong. The thief, holding tightly to his blade, still intends to finish what he started and says that he is still alive. The thief lunges at the young lord, wishing him death, but Dale silences him with a wave of his hand. At the same time, the undead that Dale summoned are tearing apart the rest of the members of the Thieves' Guild. The creature is very hungry, and because of this it is even stronger and more cruel. Dale decides to go over to Charlotte and make sure she's okay. Charlotte sits on the floor and smiles at Dale, assuring him that she is safe and sound. The last surviving thief runs out nearby, but suddenly finds an ice bullet flying at him and screams loudly. Dale helps Charlotte get up and doesn't pay any attention to what's going on around her. An ice bullet pierces the last thief's leg, giving him no chance to escape. Dale waves his hand and commands the undead to return back to their world. When the undead disappear, Dale approaches the thief, who immediately promises to tell him everything he knows. The thief swears that he will tell everything down to the smallest details, and I hope that this will save his life. Well, the young city doesn't need to know anything else, and the thief doesn't have time to understand that his pleas are useless. Dale frowns and says that he is not interested in any explanations. Dale carefully examines the people sent by Count Brandenburgg, of which he is very confident. One of the thieves is still alive, and Charlotte and Dale turn their attention to him. The thief says that the House of Saxon has shown its true face, which people fear. Dale doesn't pay much attention to the last breaths of the scoundrel, and turns to Charlotte and asks what she feels being close to these people, and whether fear overcomes her. Charlotte replies that she is a little afraid, but at the same time she is perfectly fine asking Dale if he fought to protect her. Charlotte says that after the vow she made that day she made a decision. Charlotte says that if Dale's house becomes a shield that protects her, then one day she will repay him by becoming the sword that swings for him. Charlotte thanks Dale for teaching her what the future means, which makes her feel even stronger. It was a surprise for Dale to hear such words from Charlotte, who had been stingy with such things for a very long time. Well, at the same time Dale understands that Charlotte does not fully know all the true intentions towards her. Charlotte doesn't know one of the reasons why Dale took her in and doesn't know anything about his past life. Dale took her in out of guilt for what happened to Sir Bardell 24 years ago. Dale listened to Charlotte and extended his hand to her. Dale smiles at the girl and hopes that she will give him her hand in return. Charlotte thinks for a moment, then smiles at Dale and extends her hand to him. In fact, Charlotte's decision to become Dale's sword has much more significance than Dale himself could have imagined. Meanwhile, you'll be placing Count Brandenburg in charge and some unpleasant news will arrive. The game will receive a small chest containing a message. Seeing the head of one of his men in the chest sent, Count Brandenburg becomes furious. In the letter, the Count reads that everyone knows perfectly well about the difficult visit, but at the same time, he must come to the Duchy of Saxe. Count Brandenburg is asked out of respect for their sincerity not to refuse this invitation. This summons from the Duke of Noir is intended to demand a report. Count Brandenburg understands that even the great holy swordsman cannot refuse this order. A few days later, Count Brandenburg arrives at the ducal castle of Saxe, and Noir Saxe sincerely thanks him for the journey he has made. Count Brandenburg struggles to contain all his emotions and tries to appear noble. Duke Saxe notes that he never expected the swordsman to arrive so quickly after receiving the message. The Duke smiles and asks the Count to forgive him for giving him such a modest reception. Count Brandenburg, laughing slightly, asked the Duke if there might also be something more urgent than calling his lordship. At the same time, the Count does not take his eyes off Dale and Charlotte, considering them slippery little rascals. Count Brandenburg addresses the Duke and says that after the commotion at the Duke's estate, great concern is spreading throughout the empire due to an attempted kidnapping in the middle of the day. Count Brandenburg directly states that he guesses why the Duke invited him to his house. Count Brandenburg openly states that as a loyal servant of the Emperor, he could not be involved in something so shameful, to which the Duke immediately reacts by releasing shadow energy at the Count. Count Brandenburg doesn't have time to react to this. He feels completely confused. Count Brandenburg freezes in place and is hit by Duke Saxe's magic. The people who arrived with the Count felt only a slight gust of wind. The next moment people are seized with panic because they literally begin to evaporate. The Count's men beg for mercy, but it's too late. The Count, the only survivor, is astonished that even the Knights of the Order of St. Magdalene couldn't resist the Duke's magic. Count Brandenburg understands that he is dealing with dark and advanced magic. The Count learns that this is a magic storm into oblivion, and also understands that the Duke is extremely unkindly disposed towards him. The Duke orders the Count to kneel before him. His voice is resolute and unwilling to back down. The Count asks if the Duke realizes the seriousness of what he is doing now, but Noir only advises him to listen carefully. The Duke of Saxe explains that this is the first and last warning for the Count, and he grits his teeth in anger. Count Brandenburg understands how pathetic he really is in comparison to this great man, although he wishes the opposite. Even though the Dark Duke has a justification on his side, Count Brandenburg never expects him to go this far, and this forces him to obey and kneel. The Duke notes that the Count must understand that he was invited to the Saxe house only for the sake of peace. The Duke also warns that if the Count dares to raise his hand against the children of the House of Saxe again, he will be wiped off the face of the earth, as will every member of his house. The Duke asks the Count to accept his words from the bottom of his heart. The game understands what kind of situation he has found himself in. Having expressed his warnings, the Duke invites Count Brandenburg to rest and warm up after a long, difficult journey. The Count, without raising his gaze to the Duke, replies that he is grateful for the expressed generosity, but circumstances do not allow him to stay any longer. Count Brandenburg speaks every word to the Duke through teeth clenched in anger, but he knows that he cannot act otherwise. The Duke smiles, glad that the Count may have realized his mistake and will no longer be a danger. The Duke remarks to the departing Count that he will pray that his return home will pass without incident. Dale is absolutely delighted with what his father showed Count Brandenburgg, one of the Emperor's most loyal servants. Dale believes that this will be the spark that will set the entire empire on fire. It all starts with the smallest ember, but it shouldn't take long for the fire to spread. Dale believes it is their duty to defeat the Holy Warrior. When the world learns that the Holy Warrior was forced to kneel before the Dark Duke, the core of the empire will be shaken. Soon elder Lady Cipia came back to Duke Saxona's office to see something hidden under the white sheet. The Duke of Saxe abruptly rips the sheet off the table, and Lady Cipia is horrified by what she sees. The Duke explains that in front of her are the corpses of members of the Thieves' Guild that attacked Dale. The Duke also explains that everything that happened to these people was the work of Dale himself, and Cipia is even more horrified. The torn corpses with large holes through them and their entrails spilling out have a terrible effect on Lady Cipia. For the first time, Cipia begins to doubt herself in the sense that perhaps her teachings were wrong. The Duke notes that the elf herself sees the wisdom needed to direct Dale's outstanding talents in the right direction and offers her the position of chief advisor. Lady Cipia understands that, in other words, the Duke is asking her not only to remain his mentor, but to become part of the House of Saxe itself. The Duke notes that his son depends on her in many ways, but as a father he cannot guide him with his strength alone. The Duke believes that if Lady Cipia shows Dale support, everything can change. The elf, after thinking for a bit, assures that she understood the Duke. The elder replies that finding out how this child sees the world is her most important task at the moment. Lady Cipia understands that the boy is full of undiscovered talents that she must help to discover and direct on the right path. Time continues to pass until Dale's 10th birthday arrives. Unlike the previous celebration, this time even envoys from the imperial court were present. Among them, the most noticeable guest is one young man whom Dale notices immediately. Dale greets Marquis Juris, but he's not really happy to see him. Marquis Juris, with a slight incomprehensible smile, answers the young lord that it is an honor for him to attend his birthday. Some time ago, all the guests were very enthusiastic about the dishes that were brought to the table. Guests find it hard to believe that it is in the center of the Northern Territory given such a beautiful sight, and some feel foolish for always worrying about the duchy being too far from the capital. Dale listens attentively to each guest walking through the room and delving into every conversation. The central nobility, the capital of the empire, the so-called Emperor's faction, forms the largest and most influential power block in the empire, called the Emperor. The reason they came to the young lord's birthday banquet is obvious, a warning. It is a message from the imperial family that no insult to the holy warrior will go unnoticed. Dale looks closely at Marquis Juris, who has a grin on his face. Dale realizes that the messenger chosen to deliver this message without error is now standing right in front of him. Marquis Juris notes that there must be a boy, and there is young Mr. Dale. Crimson Marquis Juris expresses his great pleasure in meeting the heir to the duchy. The Crimson Marquis is the Juris Master of the Red Tower and a man who seeks fire, fury, and power through order. The Red Tower's mages were infamous for their obsession with the idea that strength equals righteousness, dating back to the imperial era. Therefore, the magicians without hesitation became the executors of their ambitions, and Dale knew very well and remembered that he himself had once been subjected to all sorts of experiments in modification by the magicians of the Red Tower. The Marquis calls Dale a young prodigy and notes that he heard that the young lord has an unrivaled talent for May that no one in the entire empire can compare with. The Marquis also recalls rumors where a young lord defending the knights of his family single-handedly destroyed a horde of orcs. The Marquis also notes that this is what was expected from his lordship's son, and Dale smiles at the Marquis in response. Dale makes a small bow and says that he very much hopes that the Marquis will enjoy the upcoming evening. Every year when Dale's birthday is celebrated in this way, he feels as tired as ever and never misses the opportunity to go outside and breathe some fresh air. In fact, Dale prefers to train Charlotte on such a day, although officially she serves as his mother Elena's maid. Dale also understands that if it becomes known that the daughter of the Divine Sword sparred with him, it could be dangerous for her. While walking through the garden, Dale suddenly hears someone's loud and piercing scream and cannot remain indifferent to it. Dale also hears that someone's male voice makes the maid apparently freeze in place and not move. Dale recognizes the scream as the familiar voice of one of the maids in his house and immediately immediately starts running towards these screams. The girl tries with all her might to escape from the clutches of her abuser, and begs him to let her go because she serves the Sack's house. The man who knocked her to the ground is surprised. Why does a simple servant think she can mention the Duke's name? The man takes out his blade, noting that everyone is busy celebrating the Duke's son's birthday and no one will help her. The man notes that it is better to spend time with a woman than to waste it standing there, and warns that if the maid resists again he will cut her throat. The man asks the maid to be good and listen to him, and by this time Dale himself arrives. Dale immediately shouts, asking the man if he is aware of his actions. The man is very surprised to see in front of him a young gentleman who looks very angry. Dale demands to know what the man is doing in this place with the maid, and here he feels a little confused. The man quickly comes to his senses and asks the young gentleman if he has ever enjoyed the company of a woman. The man smiles, noting that the young gentleman is still very young, and it is doubtful that he has had such experience. This man's name is Petro, and he holds the maid tightly and brings a sword to her throat, saying that he can teach the young master something. Petro turns to the maid and promises to teach her how to behave well, thinking that the young master will let it go. Well, instead the young gentleman decides to use one of his spells, aiming at Petro. Dale promises the maid that he will soon try to rid her of this monster. Dale reflects on the fact that in this world built on hierarchy, no one could have imagined that the young master would be an attacker. The next moment Dale uses one of the spells and hits Petro with it, who immediately lets go of the girl. Petro falls to the ground and the maid tries to crawl away from him as far as possible. Dale is not going to back down and is waiting for this monster to come to his senses so he can continue talking to him. He understands that this man is close to the emperor and challenging the emperor's people is not the smartest thing to do, but nevertheless he intends to see the matter through and punish the man. Petro steps back and asks the young gentleman what he is doing, but Dale, instead of answering, orders him to kneel. Petro tries to protest such an order, but Dale shouts and asks if Petro didn't hear him since he doesn't want to obey. Dale demands the man to kneel and apologize to Miss Eva, the Sack's house servant. Dale emphasizes that the girl said that she serves in his house and is one of the members of this house. Petro begins to laugh and informs that unfortunately for the young gentleman, he stands here as a representative of His Majesty himself, and that insulting him while defending the honor of a girl of low birth is tantamount to insulting the emperor. Dale still seriously wonders if His Majesty enjoys raping noble houses out loud for fun. Petro is very indignant and does not understand how the young lord could dare to say such a thing. By this time the Duke and several other very important individuals appear in response to the shouts and noise. And don't pay attention to the appearance of the parents, and the Marquis tells Petro that this is his last warning and repeats that he should get on his knees. The Marquis says through a smile that he very much doubts that Petro will obey this order. The Marquis also notes that he sees a very interesting turn of events which amuses him greatly. The Duke goes to his son and demands to know what is happening, to which Dale explains that Petro tried to use violence on one of the Sack's house servants. The young lord pauses for a moment, considering his father's words. The Duke is furious that his son would show such disrespect to Lord Petro, and he confirms that the young master was acting recklessly and tries to get up. But Dale gestures for him to stay put and is indignant that he did not give such an order. Dale turns to his parents and other guests who also ran out of the castle at the noise and says that they have been given the great duty of acting in place of His Majesty. Dale points to Lord Petro and notes that he tried to discredit a simple servant girl for blemishes on His Majesty's name. Dale explains that he therefore could not stand by and allow Lord Petro's shameful behavior to go unpunished, and the young master's words greatly amuse Marquis Juris. The Marquis passes through the crowd and, heading towards the young gentleman, notes that he is a very intelligent young man. The Marquis smiles and emphasizes that Dale is telling the truth, taking his side. The Marquis agrees that no one could have imagined that the one entrusted with His Majesty's will would stoop so low as to attack a girl of low birth. These words surprise Ward, who hadn't expected no one to protect him. The Crimson Marquis Juris smiles and fire flares at the tips of his fingers. The Marquis looks at the Lord with contempt and says that he should burn like a dirty insect. The Lord immediately jumps up and tries to escape from the Marquis's fire, pleading that he be spared. But the Marquis Juris begins to laugh loudly and the fire on his hands flares up faster. The flame of the Marquis quickly catches up with Lord Petro. Don't give him a chance for forgiveness. The Lord begins to scream loudly, complaining about how much pain he is in, and continues continues to beg for mercy. Soon the Lord's voice fades away and only the noise of the flames can be heard. The Marquis turns to the young gentleman and assures him that everything he has said is true and emphasizes that it is his duty to destroy the worms that dare to insult the Empire and the imperial family. Marquis Juris smiles at Dale and sincerely wishes him success. Dale realizes that the Lord Marquis's punishment is not an act of honor but another trap. The unrest soon subsided. The Emperor's men began to leave and peace began to reign in the Saxe household. The night passed rather quietly. Dale was awakened by the maid's voice. The maid Eva stands near the young master's bed and asks him to wake up because it was already time to get up. Dale thanks Eva for waking him up, but she notes that this is nonsense and does not deserve gratitude. Dale sees that Eva is very worried and asks if she wants to say something. Eva thanks the young master and says that it is a great honor for her that a person like her can serve him. Dale is surprised that that was all the maid wanted to say. He thinks about how he's lived in two different worlds, but he's still unfamiliar with this feeling and will have to get used to it. Dale smiles and thanks Viva for such kind words. Dale understands that as the eldest son of House Saxe, he must place great importance on his name and use it as best he can if it will help bring down the Empire. Dale goes to his father's office and his father remarks on how smart his son is. But Gertz also notes that Dale has been acting very strange lately and asks to be told if there is an excuse for this. Dale looks at his father carefully and pauses for a moment searching for the right words. Dale begins to talk about a hero from another world who might not have died in the battle with the divine sword Bardel. And he says that then the next place where the hero's sword would most likely appear was the Duchy of Saxony, which shocks the Duke. The Duke notes that this is too much of a statement. The Gertzaks ask their son where he gets such great confidence in his words. Dale thinks about how in his past life, he heard that the Empire was plotting against the House of Saxe. The Empire abandoned the hero. They feared what might happen if their hound's leash broke and attacked its master. Dale tells his father that even though the hero from another world defeated the Demon King, the Empire has not eradicated the darkness from the Demon King's domain. Dale points out that instead they issued an absurd order to seize the Demon King's lands, expand the imperial territory, and unilaterally demanded sacrifices from their home. In addition, Dale points out that the Empire also gave this land to their home. The young lord says that until the darkness on this land is completely dispelled, the bloodshed will not stop, which makes the Duke think about his son's words. Dale also points out to his father that moreover people within the Empire and beyond its northern borders point to them, the House of Saxon, calling them a clan of darkness. Dale compares this to the fact that they have also abandoned the hero and are trying to eliminate internal risks, that is, those who can threaten them from within. Gertzak is very surprised that his son is talking to him about this topic and wants to ask where he learned about it, but Dale says that these are just conclusions and inferences that he made based on the notes he read. The official hero died an honorable death after a brutal battle with the divine sword Bardel. The Duke thinks that it was quite natural that he was surprised. After all, only a few know the truth about the hero's death. Dale says that if his theory is correct, then an empire is simply an oppressor that seizes weak countries by force. The Duke concludes that his child is wise beyond his years, but he finds it difficult to accept this fact. The Duke asks his son what the House of Saxe must do to move forward, and the idea is that their house will never be able to coexist with the Empire. At that moment, the young lord declares that they must destroy the Empire. The Duke does not know how to react to such a statement from his very young son, who is already showing such cruelty. After sighing heavily and thinking, the Duke turns to his son. Noir Saxe asks Dale if he really understands what he's proposing. Dale explains that he is not saying that they should immediately raise an army and start a rebellion, but only after 10 years. Duke Saxena is puzzled by why his son is talking about this particular period. The young lord explains that even now resistance groups on all continents are seeking independence. There are vassals like the Duke of Saxe who fear that the Empire will turn its blade against them. The economy is shrinking, banditry is growing every day. Although the unification of the 7 continents has ended, the consequences of the war are only getting worse every day. Dale explains to his father that by that time they will have gathered forces to protect their home from the Empire. The young lord shares with his father that they will then support the resistance forces operating in various regions. That day Dale presented his plan for the fall of the Empire, and he and his father discussed it until sunset. Having told him a lot and noticing that his father had been deep in thought for a long time, Dale decided to ask what was bothering him. The Duke of Saxe smiles at his son. He looks very pleased, although just a moment ago he was completely perplexed. The Duke tells his son that his talents truly know no bounds, and he sees what even his father does not see. Dale is incredibly happy that his father truly appreciates his words. The Duke approaches Dale, puts his hand on his shoulder, declares that he is very proud that he is his son, and promises that from this day on he will no longer be just the Duke's eldest son and a simple 10-year-old child. The Duke promises to treat Dale as his heir, the boy who will one day lead House Saxe. The Duke promises that as head of the family he will listen to and respect his son's words. Dale waited a long time to finally receive the authority to personally rule the House of Saxe. The Duke expresses his pride in his son and decides to ask him what decision he will make regarding their family at the moment. Dale asks if his father will treat him differently before answering the question. Dale replies that if his father really treats him differently, he should give him permission to take the test of the tower in the necropolis. The Tower Challenge is a game where you have to determine your rank among the mages, where they will meet the guardians of the magic tower. Defeating higher-ranking guardians increases their status, and the strongest of them receives the title of Tower Elder, and the one at the very top receives the title of Master of the Magic Tower. The Duke asks his son if he really wants to go to such a dangerous place where he could lose his life, and notes that it is still too early for him since he has not even completed his third circle. Dale tells his father with a smile that he will do it soon. The Duke says that usually one can only pass the third circle between the ages of 20 and 30. According to Dale's father, even as a man who has already completed his second circle, passing the tower test will not be easy. Dale answers his father that this decision concerns both him and the entire House of Saxe, and the Duke asks why this is so. Dale responds by saying that if he proves his worth in the test, his status as heir will strengthen his father's position. Dale also emphasizes that he will gain a reputation that is trustworthy and not built on rumors spread by gossipmongers. The Duke wonders if this is the only reason his son wants to pass the tower test. Yes, and he honestly admits that this is the only reason why he decided to undergo this test, which makes his father smile. The Duke gives his son the go-ahead to undergo this test and leaves the matter entirely to his discretion. Dale happily thanks his father and promises that he will prove to him what he is capable of. A few days later, Dale reaches the city of death, the necropolis. The Saxe family waits a long time for the carriage and is relieved to finally see it. The carriage doors open and the Duke of Saxe steps onto the ground. All those who meet him bow their heads before the Dark Duke and greet him. Dale doesn't pay much attention to this formality and keeps yawning, trying to wake up. Dale is thinking that he may have overdone it again. All people who meet the Duke immediately notice that he arrived with his son, young Master Dale, who according to rumors is a genius of magic unparalleled in the Empire. And he will hear from the crowd that someone says that he doesn't look well that day. Dale also overhears a conversation in which they discuss his ball handling on par with the knights of the ducal house. One of the participants in the test declares that he is the great best graduate of the academy who is destined to win the test in the tower, and the noble boy looks like he will fall if you touch him. One of the magicians bows before the Duke and expresses his respect. The Duke notes with a smile that he and Eris haven't seen each other for a long time. Eris is the tower's elder, the Secretary General, handling all administrative duties in the Dark Duke's absence. Eris looks at Dale and notes that she is honored to serve the young master. Duke Saxe explains to his son that when the test begins, Eris will help him. Dale smiles at the elder and notes that he will now be in her care, and Eris asks him to follow her. Eris explains to Dale that 59 academy graduates are waiting for him to undergo the test with him. Eris opens the doors to the hall and Dale carefully examines it and gets acquainted with the furnishings. There are participants in the hall who are about to pass the tower test. Eris addresses the hall and welcomes everyone present. The girl introduces herself and explains that she is the tower's elder and chief secretary overseeing its activities. Eris explains that she will tell about the first test of the Tower of Dark Magic and asks everyone to check the necklace of life on their neck. Eris explains that the challenge will be a battle royale-style battle for life points, and each necklace contains a protective spell that will protect each participant. Eris also explains that when a participant lands a proper blow on an opponent using the corpses scattered across the battlefield, the opponent's necklace will activate its protective spell and shatter into pieces, meaning destruction. Eris explains that the attacker who lands the correct hit will receive 1 life point added to their necklace, and the participant whose total score reaches 3 points will advance to the next floor. Anyone using artifacts will be disqualified from the challenge for cheating, and Dale, looking at the necklaces, thinks it's a quick and effective way to weed out newcomers. Dale is distracted from his thoughts by a voice from the side calling him a monster. One of the participants points a finger at him and asks how did it happen that, at such an age, he is already a magician of the third circle, and suggests that everyone else first destroy him. Another of the participants asks if they are even allowed to attack this guy, but his comrade says not to worry about it. This young man explains his decision by the fact that from the moment they came to this place they became competitors. When Eris announces the start of the test, you think that at least his competitor is confident and doesn't want to see if his abilities can back up his blather. All participants take on the task of reviving corpses. Each of them knows what they are doing and is focused only on their own victory. Gradually, the corpses begin to come to life under the influence of the subject's magic. Dale watches what is happening around him carefully. Indeed, all participants in this test first of all decide to eliminate the son of the Dark Duke. Dale understands that during the first period of testing, he will face a tough fight with other competitors. Well, unexpectedly for the other competitors, Dale manages to use his powers. Right next to him, a resurrected corpse appears who is ready to fight for him, and the others do not understand when the boy managed to do this. Dale sends his temporary training to attack with other such creatures. One of the participants closest to Dale notices that he is using water magic here. The participant understands that most likely this young boy is a magician of 2 elements. This assumption makes the other participants even more angry, and they rush to attack. Dale is not at all happy that someone is trying to touch his soldiers. Dale understands that he is one of the very powerful magicians who decided to take the test and therefore behaves completely calmly. When his soldiers attack, he only laughs because he protected them with ice armor. Dale watches the undead battle unfold with a smile on his face. One of the participants approaches him and says that using water magic is considered a violation of the rules. The participant notes that only necromancy and magic that controls the undead are allowed, and all other forms of enhancement are also prohibited. Dale agrees, but also explains that there was no rule that stated he couldn't empower the undead with only dark magic. Hearing this, the manager is amazed at the boy's ingenuity. Dale, looking at the elders, is convinced of this and says that judging by the fact that the tests were not suspended, it seems he is right, which angers his competitors. The magician asks the guys standing next to him to block the corpses and aim directly at the boy. Dale's competitors are very determined to take him out first because they sense his power. Dale reflects on the fact that the use of artifacts was also prohibited. In this case, Dale understands that he has only one way to confront his competitors. Dale has no choice but to leave his previous place, and he starts running forward. The young lord tries to dodge all the animated corpses of his competitors. Dale runs straight towards one of the test participants, and a smile appears on his face. Having overtaken his competitor, Dale heads towards the undead he controls. The young lord grabs the creature's weapon and points out that he has fallen into a trap. The lord's strength is enough to resist this monster, and he deals him the first blow. Dale makes this blow in order to knock the sword out of the undead, and having received it, he turns out to be very happy. Thanks to this weapon, he has every chance of dealing with the other undead present in the hall. The competitors are very surprised that their undead are so easy to kill, but one of them notes that the boy has an unusual sword. Mock explains that the young man apparently reforged the bones to increase the strength of the sword. Dale really had no choice but to strengthen the existing sword, but now he has a big advantage. Dale tries his best to deal with all the undead as quickly as possible. The boy uses all his skills to the maximum, which amazes his competitors. The young lord is focused because he understands perfectly well that he has no other choice but to show everyone present what he is capable of. After delivering one of the blows, Dale lands on the ground without looking around. One of the participants is very shocked that the boy even defeated his last dead soldier. Many people start saying that a mage shouldn't be so good with a sword, but Dale finds it amusing. Having dealt with all the evil spirits, he approaches the competitor who started this competition. Thinking that the boy was coming to deal with him, the magician began to ask the young lord to stop and declared that he was giving up, which made Dale laugh. Dale raises his sword and states that the mage will not actually die for real, so he should not worry. Dale swings his sword and strikes the mage, and even when I try to dodge, I can't do it. Before losing consciousness, the magician says that Dale is a real monster. Eris marks the end of the first test and makes calculations, looking only at the young lord. Soon Eris announces that the young master of the Dale is passing alone with 60 hit points. Dale looks at the audience and thinks that this is only his first step forward. To pass the second floor of the tower's trial, you must defeat the guardian creature known as the flesh golem. Typically, the surviving candidates from the first level cooperate with each other to overthrow him. Dale understands that he has excluded all the candidates with whom he could cooperate, and now he will have to fight this monster alone. Dale takes into account that unlike the rules of the first floor, he is now allowed all forms of magic. Dale also notes that while the rule of not using artifacts still applies, it's more than enough for him. The young lord believes that this is a wonderful opportunity to test the limits of his third circle. The flesh golem's blows are incredibly powerful, causing the floor to literally crack underfoot. But no matter how hard the golem tried to catch the boy, he kept slipping out of his hands. The golem growls in displeasure as it tries to find its small opponent. Dale stands to the side, activating one of his spells. Dale smiles and looks at the golem like she's just one extra point to get. Eris stands next to Duke Saxon and says that his son's magic is quite unusual. Eris wonders why the young lord chose to leave the golem to rot instead of destroying it outright. Dale remembers that in his past life, when he faced monsters, strategy was as important as firepower. It was called biochemical warfare. The only side effect of this attack was the violent warfare of the rotting corpse. Dale is very curious if they even understand that what they are witnessing is called a grotesque process of biochemical warfare and is now expressed through dark magic. That day Dale successfully passes the exam, climbing to the 10th floor and setting a new record. Then he was given 4 days of rest before the 11th floor test, and in the meantime to recover from the unprecedented rubber on the first floor. 59 other participants were allowed to retest, with the exception of Dale, of course. That same evening after the test, Dale went out into the yard and approached the fountain, thinking about many things. Suddenly the boy heard someone talking to him and turned towards the voice. He saw Lady Cipia, who praised him for his excellent performance. Dale notes that he achieved such success thanks to her guidance, and Lady Cipia replies that she is very proud to hear this from him. Deciding to take advantage of the opportunity, Dale turns to the Sepia lady with a question. Dale asks if the elf wants to go on a date with him, and the Sepia lady freezes in place in great surprise at this question. Dale explains that there is a city festival going on right now and they have to go to it. After thinking for a bit, the elf agreed, thinking that the young man simply did not understand the true meaning of what was said. Cipia thinks that the young lord is not technically mistaken, although there must still be a misunderstanding of what a date actually is. Dale is glad that Lady Cipia agrees to go to the festival with him and smiles. Soon Dale and Cipia find themselves at the city's necropolis festival. The elf suggests out loud that the young lord must be tired after such a difficult test, but the young lord replies that he is perfectly fine. Dale says that he still has a few days left before the start of the next test, and Lady Cipia replies that this is nice to hear. For a while Dale and Lady Cipia walk in silence, not speaking to each other. That night the full moon rises high in the sky, and Dale notices it and asks the Cipia lady if she likes it. The elf raises her head and smiling replies that the young lord is absolutely right. Dale notices that his conversation with Lady Cipia is no longer going as easily as before. But the young lord also notes that this silence between them does not cause discomfort, and it has always been like this with Cipia. Dale suggests that maybe it's because Cipia believed in him from the start, but he also finds himself wanting to get closer to her. A few days ago, on the day when Dale passed his third circle, he finally understands what Cipia meant when she said to turn to the inner world. Dale sits for a long time on the balcony and drives all his energy in a circle when suddenly he feels blood flowing from his nose. Dale doesn't want to stop because he needs to fill his mana reserve beyond the second circle. The Lord understands that only by withstanding the raging mana can he reach his third circle. Dale feels his power raging within him, but he feels it's not enough. Dale feels trapped, but he continues to take one step forward. The young lord is attentive to his feelings and tries to direct them on the right path. At some point Dale finds himself in another dimension. The young man looks around and realizes that he is in a snowy wasteland, but at the same time the place seems familiar to him. The young man recalls the words of his teacher that when a person immerses himself in deep meditation, his inner world inevitably manifests. Dale understands that everything around him is his inner world and the world of awareness. From the very beginning there was nothing in this place, only absolute emptiness, which Dale does not feel for a long time. In this empty world, the Sepia master extends his hand to him, and only after some time does he understand it. Looking at his teacher, Dale realizes that perhaps she is the one who brings light into his world. Dale, after much thought, decides to tell Cipia that he really likes her, which causes her a wave of embarrassment. Cipia asks the student to repeat again what he said, hoping that she just misheard. Dale smiles and repeats to himself again that he likes her, and these words simply make the elf shudder. She hopes that this is just a childish confession and smiles at him in response. Cipia hugs the boy and says that she understands how he feels. Cipia tells Dale that she really likes him too. Dale thanks the teacher and thinks that reliving certainly has its advantages, especially in his case. After a few days, the time comes when Dale is tested again. Dale is testing the tower on the 11th floor but is very upset because he didn't get anything right with the Cipia. Dale realizes she probably dismissed his confession as the childish impulse of a 10-year-old. He understands that his love must wait, he needs to focus on his exam. Eris is told that the format of this test will be a one-on-one magical duel. The winner of this challenge must move to the 12th floor. Master of the Third Circle Albert Rosenheim says that it is a great honor for him to meet young Master Dale. Albert Rosenheim asks the young lord not to expect that he will be lenient or that he is only treating him because he is a child, and Dale is smiling at him. I am glad that this will not be the case. The 11th floor challenge allows the use of all types of artifacts. This challenge also allows the use of magical strategies, meaning the necklace of life cannot guarantee anyone's safety. Dale is glad that the restrictions on the use of artifacts have been lifted, because now he doesn't have to hold back. And he thinks that he will completely crush the enemy or show him the difference in strength. Eris announces the start of the duel, and Dale's opponent immediately unleashes his magical powers. A powerful surge of magic erupts where the young lord stands. Albert Rosenheim laughs and warns that the boy should be on his guard. Albert Rosenheim states that he is not like the new academy graduates the young lord had to deal with before and warns that his streak does not end there. Albert sends dark arrows towards Dale and he barely manages to put up a shield. Albert looks at the confused boy and suggests seeing if he can block the next attack. Albert Rosenheim looks very confident and is more than convinced that he will win this test. He attacks the young boy mercilessly, making him doubt his strength. Dale struggles to stand and dodge attacks as well as block them. The young lord understands that even if it was only for a moment, using an attack spell before the duel began is a clear violation. Dale looks at the judges who haven't given any sign or signal to stop the fight and thinks that they should be curious to see how strong he really is. This is why Dale has hated magicians since his past life, although in this one he has the great advantage of mastering magic. Albert Rosenheim uses spells to resurrect the dead. Albert says that his servants are born from a darkness deeper than the bloodthirsty night. Dale rolls his eyes, not understanding where his opponent even learned such a ridiculous performance. Dale still understands that his opponent is definitely stronger than an ordinary newbie, and it will not be so easy for him to fight him. A powerful explosion occurs right under Dale's feet and the boy is thrown into the air, but he manages to jump back in time and is only slightly grazed. Albert laughs and asks the young lord how long he plans to dodge and still remains confident that he cannot defeat him simply by avoiding him. Dale tries to ignore his opponent's conversations and focuses only on fighting the undead. Even Albert's undead powers prove to be quite powerful compared to those wielded by other mages he has already fought. Since Dale has been training and preparing for this challenge for a long time, he manages to buy himself some time. Dale looks at Albert and suggests out loud that he apparently has nothing more to show. But these words only make the magician smile. Albert casts a deadly explosion spell, and the undead in front of the young master begins to swell. The next moment, a powerful magical explosion occurs that affects the young master. Albert starts laughing loudly and repeats that he will be a winner no matter what. Well, almost immediately after the explosion, Albert is amazed. His opponent Dale isn't there where the explosion occurred. Albert twists his head around trying to figure out where the boy disappeared to. Albert hears Dale's voice, wondering if it is a low act to deceive a child. Albert continues to look around the entire battlefield but still cannot find the young lord. Dale, who is hiding in the shadows, notes that his opponent looks quite agitated. Dale laughs as he notes that Albert's magic was a clever sneak attack but clearly not enough to defeat him. Albert Rosenheim is seriously scared because he never expected any such transformations from Dale. The evil spirit that Dale summoned is very hungry and asks its master to eat the enemy. Deus listens to this plea with a smile and waits for the right time to give the right command. What are you doing for a while? When Albert is scared enough, Dale gives the evil spirit permission to try the enemy but not to overeat. All the spectators watching this fight suddenly grimace and some even close their eyes. Evil spirits attack Albert out of nowhere, and he doesn't even have the opportunity to see them. The evil spirits bite into his body and finally satisfy their hunger, and Dale describes the situation as the evil spirits probably got a little carried away by their intense hunger. Albert Rosenheim begs Dale for mercy and pleads to let him go. Having played enough, Dale gives the command to his evil spirit to retreat back, and it abandons Albert. Eris immediately announces the winner of the first round to be Dale, who still managed to overcome such a strong opponent as Albert considered himself to be. Dale is very pleased with himself at the end of this round and is smiling widely. He turns to his potential opponents and asks which of them is ready for the second round. But they only back away in fear. Each of the opponents takes turns declaring that they give up and just want to live, which makes Dale smile. I start from the third round, and then all fights except the final one end in victory by default. Dale continues to refine and shape his 3 magical circles. As he began to break through the guards of each floor, by the time he reached the 20th floor, a worthy opponent had finally appeared. A headless horseman and a knight with nothing in place of his head appeared before the little Dale. Eris explains to everyone present that this is the headless knight who created you, one of the elders of the Dark Tower, and this enemy is unlike any of the previous ones. Eris emphasizes that even for young Master Dale, this may be the highest achievement he is capable of. Dale wonders if it will be boring if everything goes as expected. The test begins, and Dale immediately uses one of his magical abilities. The spectators are a little nervous and don't understand at all what's happening on the battlefield. The test really does not start as usual, and all eyes are glued to the stage. To everyone's great surprise, the headless knight kneels before the young lord. Dale looks at the headless knight carefully, completely focused. Dale imagines himself in his inner world where he communicates with this knight. Dale asks the knight to end his torment and then stabs himself with a sword. Dale doesn't even touch his opponent and thus wins the final challenge. Dale is very surprised that the knight has such devotion that he even refuses his duties as a guard. Deep in thought, Dale doesn't even immediately notice that there is complete silence around him. The young lord looks at the audience and realizes that he may have gone a bit too far. Dale thought it was only natural to be shocked, especially that the creation had betrayed its creator and sworn allegiance to him, but this proved that he had reached a level equal to that of the Elder of the Dark Tower. Diwu is considering whether it has proven itself enough and whether it should return. The young lord silently heads towards the stage exit, and everyone wonders why he decides to return. The young lord thinks that even if he could rise higher, there must still be a line that he should not cross. Beyond this level lies a kingdom that even monsters fear, something truly unknown, and he decides to give it up. And thus his trials come to an end. Just like the tower test, the entire Dark Tower rose in a single impulse, as if at a military parade. Everyone worships the young lord and admires his magical skills. Nobles and elders alike show their devotion to the little lord, and every poppy in the tower pays its respects to father and son. Thanks to Dale's stunning performance, the northern territories begin to unite under their banner. In the north of the empire, in the Duchy of Saxe, knights fight against orcs. Knights rush into battle very boldly because they understand why they are doing it. This battle is a necessity and a duty for everyone involved in the Saxe family. The knights fight for the name of the young lord of the House of Saxe without stopping or hesitating. After successfully completing the tower's test, Duke Saxe appoints Dale as the commander of a squad to destroy the orc horde. Now the young lord has the opportunity to independently control a squad and lead them into battle, proving his strength. This is a difficult task, especially too difficult for a 10-year-old. Despite this, no one doubts the young lord's competence as a commander. Thus, as the laws dictate, the heir of the Dark Duke of Dale gradually begins to unite the north. After the battle, Dale and his squad return back to the Dark Castle. The first thing Dale does is go to his father and tell him that he and his squad killed 145 orcs. The Duke of Saxe asks his son what the cavalry losses were, and then decisively answers that only 3 were slightly wounded. The Duke asks his son if he used magic to protect his people, and then turning away replies that he did not. Dale explains that this was solely due to the swords of House Saxe, which makes the Duke smile. Noir Saxe praises his son, and he is truly proud of him. Sir Helmet turns to the Duke and notes that it seems that young Master Dale has already mastered the command of large cavalry units, and Dale assures that this is all thanks to the knight's instructions. Sir Helmet teaches Dale swordsmanship tactics and military strategy and thus gave him much that Dale now uses. The knight suggests that at this rate Dale will soon begin waging full-scale territorial wars. Dale is just waiting for the moment when he can really get involved in something like this because he is always happy about a new stage. Dale also doesn't forget about training with Charlotte, who is also achieving greater success every day. Dale and Charlotte often spar and show off what they've learned by teaching each other. Charlotte has made significant progress in her swordsmanship during her time at the Saxe household. Charlotte is increasingly able to win her next sparring match. Dale really enjoys their training sessions. He's thrilled to see Charlotte getting stronger, but at the same time Dale never gives in to her, but the girl can withstand any of his blows. Training can last for hours until one of the opponents gets tired. Dale sometimes forgets that he should be more careful than before because Charlotte's sword often whistles near his ear. After another blow from the girl, Dale notes that she has become a much better fighter. Charlotte turns away, noting that she knows perfectly well that she can't compare to him. At which point Dale starts laughing and asks if he teased her too much. Charlotte looks away again and reminds him that Dale has already reached the 3rd circle and the 20th floor of the tower. The girl also emphasizes that since then everyone has been addressing him with excessive dignity and wonders if they themselves aren't tired of it. Dale looks at Charlotte and asks her not to worry about it and promises the girl that she too will become stronger and it just takes time. Dale reflects on the fact that Charlotte is only 10 years old and by any standards she is already exceptional. Charlotte doesn't like the way Dale treats her and asks him to stop treating her like a child. Dale frowns and reminds her that Charlotte is actually a child, but she responds with a finger reminding him that he is the same way. The young lord starts laughing at this and declares that he is already an adult, which makes Charlotte laugh too, and there he suggests they just move on. After training with Charlotte, Dale goes on to other training. Dale spends a lot of time with Sir Helmet. The knight leads him into the great hall and they sit on the sofa at the large table. The knight declares that their lesson today will be devoted to hammer and anvil tactics and placing a chess knight on the table. The knight explains that in battle, when cavalry forces are engaged on one or both flanks, the cavalry's task is to break through the enemy's flanks and encircle him. The knight also emphasizes that, in the meantime, the infantry must block the advance of the enemy cavalry. The knight also explains that the hammer and anvil tactic is so called because it is the same as placing iron on an anvil and hitting it with a hammer, and that this tactic relies heavily on cavalry. Dale thinks that this is really only possible thanks to the Black Cavalry, and the models of warfare are similar in every world. When the knight takes a short pause, Dale decides to ask him a question. Dale asks Sir Helmet how Charlotte's training is going. Sir Helmet thinks and says that the girl wants and cannot compare with the young master, but things are really going great for her. The knight tells the young lord that Charlotte has already grasped her basic fencing skills and will soon officially inherit the development of aura and the swordsmanship of the Saxe house. The knight mentions that there is still one cause for concern in the Charlotte situation, and Dale suggests that it lies in Charlotte's compatibility with their sword-wielding style. While mages transform mana into magic with their heart circles, knights transform mana into aura with their cultivation methods. Mages build magical towers by mastering the structure. At that time, the knights formed orders passing on their sword techniques. Among them are the Black Cavalry of the North, resembling war chariots. The strength that the Order of the Knight Raven Knights of House Saxe possesses clearly demonstrates that the Northern Knights specialize in crushing the battlefield with brute force. The problem is that Charlotte's sword technique is based on speed and fluidity of movement. Charlotte wields a fast, free-flying sword, and given her talent, she could possibly reach the lowest rank of the 7 swordmasters. Unfortunately for her, the girl has little chance, or rather no chance at all, of becoming the first sword. The pinnacle of the 7 swords is a position her father once held. Charlotte doesn't know about this yet, and the Knight Helmet avoids this conversation in every possible way so as not to remind the girl of her father. Dale looks closely at Knight Helmet and remembers the Sword of Blossom. Dale suggests that if only this art of swordsmanship still existed, then everything might be different, and the knight generally agrees with this. However, Dale realizes that it was completely lost after the fall of the knightly nation. Dale wonders if it could really disappear from this world forever. After this, Dale's days become even more ruthless. As he combines monster slaying with his studies, his reputation continues to grow steadily. The time has come to showcase the results of his progress. At the same time, some rather important people come to the Duke with unpleasant news that the Duke cannot believe. The Duke learns that a neighboring territory ruled by Baron Parker has declared a territorial war demanding ownership of a copper mine belonging to the man who came to complain. Dale reflects on the fact that in this world the boundaries between countries and peoples are much less clear than one might think, but nevertheless a low-ranking nobleman starting a fight with a high-ranking nobleman is absurd. The nobleman is even afraid to tell the Duke that he might have to refuse to free the mine and accept the challenge. The nobleman shows a letter saying that Count Brandenburgg sided with the Baron to maintain his peace. The nobleman also notes that moreover a letter has arrived proposing to send the Knights of the Order of St. Magdalene in exchange for a share of the mine's profits. Dale is angry. I understand how these people are going to act now. Dale understands that Count Brandenburgg still hasn't forgotten the humiliation he suffered that day from his father, and decides that if things continue like this he will respond in kind. Dale understands that Count Brandenburgg apparently intends to continue in the same spirit. The young man assumes that from that very day on the Count must have thought only about how to pay back for the humiliation he received from the Dark Duke. At that time it was indeed very difficult for the Count to openly start a territorial war, so he decided to settle the matter in the border region where his presence was ambiguous. After listening to the nobleman, Dale decides to turn to the Duke. Dale declares that he will personally command this battle along with the Knights of House Saxe, but the Duke immediately makes it clear that this is impossible. The Gerts explain this by saying that it is too early for his son to take on such a responsibility, and asks him to refrain from making rash statements because a war against people is completely different from the destruction of monsters. The young lord did not expect such an answer at all and was very upset. The Duke turns to Baron Greenbelt and asks him not to worry. He promises that he will personally guard his mine. The Baron, with a trembling voice, thanks the Dark Duke for his help and understanding. The young lord is very angry that his father does not want to listen to him. I believe that he knows better than anyone what can be done. Sir Helmet asks the young lord not to pay too much attention to the Duke's word. The knight assumes that the young gentleman must be disappointed, but explains that the Duke probably has some reason for this. Trying to distract the young gentleman from his dark thoughts, the knight declares that in any case he has prepared something for him. The knight places a chessboard on the table and asks the young lord if he would like to play a game of strategy with him. Dale knows that this game is similar to chess, but in this world it is called something else. The knight explains that the game is very similar to a real battle, so the rules here are complicated, but once Dale gets the hang of it, it will help him a lot. The knight also notes that if the young lord plays against him, they will be able to have a serious talk about the battlefield. But at that very moment the young lord jumps off his seat and runs to the board. Dale snatches the board from under Helmet's nose and runs, raising it high above his head. Dale immediately goes with the chessboard to his father, who doesn't quite understand what is required of him. Dale demands his father play this game, and if he wins he'll be allowed to join the territorial war. The Duke is very surprised that his son hasn't changed his mind even after hearing him out loud. Dale answers his father that he realized that war is not just a clash of forces but a serious competition of minds, and by this time the knight Helmet enters the office. Dale tearfully asks his father to evaluate him based on one match, but the Duke only remains silent, looking completely dissatisfied. The knight invites the Duke to talk to his son, and tries to take him out of the office, but suddenly the Duke asks the knight to let the boy go. Gertzak nevertheless agrees to play this game and promises that if his son wins, his wish will be fulfilled. Dale happily runs back to the table with his father and thanks him for believing in him, but the Hertzians warn him that if his son loses, he should give up the idea of participating in this battle. Dale immediately jumps into a strategic war game with his father. Thanks to his knowledge and his past life, Dale understands perfectly what the essence of this game is and confidently moves the pieces. Knight Helmet watches the game from the sidelines and is very surprised with each move of the young gentleman, who seemed to have never seen this game before. Dale manages to checkmate his father, and he joyfully declares that this is his victory. The knight analyzes the situation and realizes that despite the Duke's caution, young Master Dale took advantage of his superior numbers and favorable terrain. The knight can't believe until the very end that Dale won 2 out of 3 matches against the Duke himself. Dale asks his father if he can keep his promise since he lost and he has no choice but to agree. The Gertzaks ask their son how long he has been familiar with this game, and Dale replies that several years ago he found a rulebook in the library and began studying it. Of course Dale lied, because if he hadn't somehow spun this lie it would have seemed too strange. Gertzak gets up from the table saying that his promise is irrefutable and he intends to fulfill it. The Duke says that on his own behalf he is transferring to his son full command of the knights in the upcoming battle, and after these words Helmut wants to object to him. The Duke explains that however, no matter how high his expectations are for his son, the honor of the house is at stake and defeat will not be accepted. The Duke notes in a very stern tone that this is the last time they are asking. Noir Sax looks at his son and asks if he can really handle this battle alone. Dale assures his father that he is up to the task and asks him to trust him, promising that he will prove that he can do it. The Duke is pleased with his son's answer and lets go of all doubts. Sometime later in the Brandenburg fortress you listen to the Count's cry, who curses at his man who has been drinking and wandering around the slums all day again. The Count states that rumors have begun to circulate that the young scion of the House of Saxony will personally lead his knights. The Count tries to find out from his son Philip what he is going to do, but he only continues drinking and asks his father not to worry. Philip is sure that Dale Saxon is just a 10-year-old brat who is not worth worrying about. Philip asks his father to allow him to crush the arrogant offspring of the Saxon house together with his knights, but this only makes the Count grin. Count Brandenburg loudly hits the table with his fist, causing Philip to flinch. The Count disagrees with his son's opinion that Dale is just a 10-year-old brat. The Count is also unhappy with the fact that his son speaks of him as an arrogant brat and explains that this boy is a monster that Philip will not be able to cope with in 100 years. The Count gets up and pushes his son onto the sofa, saying that he is a pathetic insect, inferior even to a 10-year-old child. The Count thinks that he should have taken care of Charlotte a long time ago, but he never got her. The Count exhaled and in his fervor declared to his son that in the upcoming battle he would give him command of their knights, which made him very happy. The Count doesn't understand why Philip is so happy, because his task will only be to simply stand and look beautiful, but Philip doesn't understand what his father is getting at. The Count explains that Sir Milvas will be in charge of the actual command and Philip's task will simply be to be the nominal head of the army, and that will be enough. Having said everything, the Count asks Sir Milvas to take his son out of the office. The Count curses to himself because he himself wants to go out onto the battlefield, but he cannot go against a child. The Count suspects that sending his son to war was also part of Duke Sax's plan. At the same time, Dale is jumping through the corridors of his castle and is very happy that he is going to this battle. A few days later, a detachment of House Sax slowly begins to gather on Baron Greenbelt's territory. Baron Greenbelt is constantly on the edge of his seat, worrying greatly about the outcome of the upcoming battle. The Baron, however, does not forget about respect and personally meets the Duke's son. Dale dismounts and is immediately thanked for the long journey he has made. The Baron's knights are very surprised that a child has actually come to them and begin to doubt whether he even knows how to wield a sword. The Baron approaches the young lord and says that with him by his side his house feels more secure, and they all feel a real sense of relief. The Baron silently wonders how Gertzak could have sent a 10-year-old boy, even considering that he was accompanied by the Black Valeria. Entrusting complete command to such a young guy is beyond the pale. The Baron tries not to show what he is thinking and asks the young lord to go into the house and attend the banquet prepared for him, but Dale states that they do not have much time. The Baron immediately turns pale and carefully asks what exactly the young lord means. Dale swings her sword and gently places it against the Baron's chest. The young lord states that he first wants to inspect the condition of the troops under his command. The Duke's son asks the Baron with a smile who is the strongest of the soldiers under his command.